Thank you. Sorry, just getting my running order sorted out, hopefully. But I know we welcome everybody to this full council meeting on the 26th of January, 5 p.m. We start with apologies. Jonathan, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've received apologies from Councillors Sanderson and Harley, and I know Councillor Yateman will be late. Councillor Yateman is here.
Thank you. Do I see any other apologies? Councillor Jarvis?
Councillor Mundy has asked me to let you know that he will be late.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Councillor Chapman will be late.
Thank you. Councillor Smoten?
I don't know if you, I didn't hear whether you had an apology for Councillor Sanderson, but I know that she'd intended to send one, and Councillor Goddard will be late.
Thank you. Councillor Railton?
Just that Councillor Diggins will be a bit late as well. Thank you.
Any more for any more? No. Thank you. Okay, do we have any declarations of interest? No, seeing none. We move on to the minutes of previous meetings. So there were two, the full council held on the 24th of November and the special meeting on the 14th of January. Can I have a proposal? Well, can we agree that those are a true and accurate record? And I do need a seconder for this. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for seconding it. Are we all happy to agree that those are a true and accurate record?
Aye.
Hands up or nods? Thank you, that's clearly carried. Excellent, thank you. Then the next item is appointments to committee, but we are going to leave that because we do have a much later item on the agenda about agreeing to not to have the political proportionality that we would normally do. So we will leave that until we come to that. So then we move on to announcements, which starts with me. So just briefly, I think, again, I'm realising that the joy of being Lord Mayor in this wonderful, diverse city of ours, this weekend was a lot about passing down traditions and stories to the next generation. I was at the Saraswati Puja Festival, which is to the goddess Saraswati of knowledge. And that's lots of emphasis on children having their first writing experience happens at this festival. And again, lots of lovely family community time coming together. And the second thing was the Kilsby Boat Project, which it's just got a huge lottery grant to restore a canal butty. And a canal butty is like a canal barge, but doesn't have a motor. It gets towed by another one. And this is one, I think it's nearly 100 years old, and it's going to be turned into a sort of theatre and educational space, again, where they can bring the stories to life of the tradition of what living on a canal barge used to be like. So, I think that's it from me. Deputy Lord Mayor, do you have anything to add?
No, Lord Mayor.
Sheriff, do you?
No.
Thank you. Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wanted to update Council on our consultation response to the current consultation that Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue are conducting on the fire service in Oxfordshire. And it's actually quite timely because I received a letter this morning, or today at any rate, from the University of Oxford expressing their very deep concerns about it as well, which very much align with ours. So Councillor Lubna Arshad and I recently met with Rob McDougall, Oxfordshire's Chief Fire Officer, to hear directly from him about the proposals the county has for the future of fire services in the city, and this enabled us to ask direct questions. I'm very grateful to him for making the time to meet us, but I'm sorry to say that I did not find the meeting very reassuring. Just a reminder to Council, the proposals are to lengthen response times in the city and to potentially remove Rooley Road and Kidlington fire stations, replacing them with one in North Oxford. I wanted to take this opportunity to share with full Council the main points of our response to their consultation. Firstly, Oxford's risk profile. Oxford is significantly different to that of the rest of the county, and its risk profile and its need of fire and rescue services needs to be reflected in the service that is offered. The city has a significant transient population, including of large numbers of students, and contains a concentration of HMOs. The city also has a number of high-rise tower blocks, major hospital sites, and unique World Heritage buildings. Additionally, the growing level of lab space in the city brings its own challenges given the substances and equipment contained within. All of these create additional complexity and access issues that require the current resource within the city being retained and response times kept at their current levels. We consider having a fire station centrally in the city is something that should be retained unless there is evidence that they improve the service offered to the city. That is not the case. The proposals explicitly say that response times will worsen. We also have concerns that the expertise and understanding of these complex buildings will not be shared by crews from surrounding areas. Furthermore, the extensive and busy waterways within the city present a unique risk. There have tragically been a number of deaths associated with our rivers and canal over recent years, both in terms of fires on our canal boats and also deaths in the water. Support for these incidents up until now would have come from Rewley Road and Kidlington. The specialist services for dealing with issues in our waterways comes from Kidlington, and we're concerned at suggestions that some of this expertise could be broken up and spread thinly around the county. And I also want to deal directly with the lack of acknowledgement of the community impact report contained within the consultation. The EQIA, undertaken as part of this work, highlights a number of negative impacts on Oxford's communities, but then fails to mitigate them within the proposals, and they seem to be dismissed altogether on the basis that overall rural areas are getting a fairer outcome, which actually ignores the EQIA altogether. So let me quote directly from the EQIA. The recommendations and considerations for change would create greater parity in emergency response performance across the county, with performance improving in general in rural and lower density urban areas. It is anticipated that this greater parity in response performance, although worsening the service slightly for Oxford's more relatively deprived communities, would offset an existing inequality in emergency response performance and positively support Oxfordshire's rural communities. So in other words, it's fine to sacrifice the more deprived communities in Oxford in favour of more rural, less deprived communities. The EQIA goes on to acknowledge, as of 2019, Oxford remains the most deprived of the 5 Oxfordshire districts. On that basis, any change that results in a poorer emergency response to Oxford City arguably has an overall detrimental impact on those areas of deprivation in Oxford. This ignoring of the impact on deprived communities is exacerbated further as the EQIA also notes that deprivation is a risk factor in fatalities from accidental dwelling fire. The EQIA seems to justify this.
1 second, Councillor. You'd have to say what your point of order is.
This is a speech. This is a substantive speech, not an announcement.
I understand that there's no particular rules prevent.
No. So I'm updating Council on our response to an important consultation. I would have thought Council would want to hear this.
There's no point of order. Do carry on, Councillor Brown.
Thank you. This ignoring of the impact on deprived communities is exacerbated further as the EQIA also notes that deprivation is a risk factor in fatalities from accidental dwelling fire. The EQIA seems to justify this negative impact on Oxford's deprived communities by suggesting that other deprived communities across the county will benefit. There is no apparent analysis to support this assertion, as the EQIA also makes it clear that it is generally only rural areas that will benefit from the changes, and the IMD data shows that urban areas of Oxfordshire are relatively more deprived than rural areas, with all 11 of the county's most deprived areas located in urban settings. The EQIA also notes that the proposals will have a disproportionate impact on the non-white British communities in Oxford, justifying this on the basis that ethnicity isn't considered a risk factor regarding accidental dwelling fires. Although on-call recruitment seems to be a large part of the drive for these changes, particularly with the on-call model currently being used across much of the county, it is unclear what work has been undertaken to address this issue. And we also made representations on the consultation itself. as I made clear to the Chief Fire Officer, formal consultation with all major stakeholders is needed on these proposals, and this must include Oxford's education establishments. At the time that we met with Rob McDougall just a week or so ago, this had not yet happened, and Oxford colleges were only just being made aware of this potential threat to their students and were very concerned. As I mentioned earlier, the university have now given a formal response. We also noted that the consultation survey was long, difficult to follow, and leading towards preferred options. Finally, in the context of local government reorganisation, the creation of mayoral strategic authorities and growth plans throughout the county, future needs should be taken into account in the decision-making of the future of Oxfordshire's Fire and Rescue Service. In summary, in our response, we did not support any reduction in the level of resource available in the city or its surround. The unique risk factors in Oxford, outlined in my comments above, mean the current response times and levels of resource need to be maintained or improved, not downgraded. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to turn to the Chief Exec, see if she has any announcements. The Chief Finance Officer is not present, and Monitoring Officer, fine, good. Okay, so moving to item 6, which is public addresses relating... Oh, thank you. Please, City Rector, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. Good evening, everybody. For those whom I haven't yet seen, Happy New Year. Lovely to be here tonight. Apologies again, I've got to go off to another meeting. Fun fact for this evening, it is the 100th anniversary of the first display of the television by John Logie Baird in 1926. And I caught myself thinking today, well, has the invention of the television been a blessing or a curse? And I came to the somewhat predictable and obvious answer, it all depends what's on it. It all depends what it's used for. And then I thought, well, that's actually quite true of most of our discoveries, inventions, and most of the stuff we do. It all depends what we're using it for. Do we use the TV, do the producers use it to build up or to put down, to encourage or to discourage, etc., etc. As I leave tonight, I shall be thankful for all of you for your efforts to build up and not put down in our wonderful city. So thank you very much, and apologies for a somewhat trivial anniversary tonight. And Happy New Year again.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, so now we are moving on to item 6, which is public addresses relating to matters for decision today. We have 2, and the first one will be appearing now. Welcome to Deborah Glass-Woodin, and you have up to 5 minutes to make your address. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Council. When I arrived in Oxford in the early 90s, one of the first campaigns I was involved in was to oppose the demolition of the dozens of houses on the south side of Botley Road. You heard right, houses, to make way for the out-of-town retail warehouses. Those very buildings are now being demolished just 30 years on to build much-needed homes? No, to build tech labs. Since then, we've seen the expansion of Blackbird Leys, the building of Barton Park, proposals for or delivery of housing on precious pockets of open space and local parks. Spindlebury and Blackbird Leys, Bertie Park and Redbridge Meadow in South Oxford, and the Horsefields in Iffley, to name but a few. The local plan has clearly stated over the years that housing will be the priority for this council. Have we come even close to solving the housing crisis? Yet acres of brownfield are still identified in this plan for employment. Maybe housing could go there too, as the scrutiny committee were told the other week. But it should be designated for housing. Because this city and this county isn't short of jobs, quite the opposite. It's blessed with full employment. It is short of housing. Homes that are fit for the future at prices that local residents can afford. It's also short on local parks, play spaces, and nature. The wealth inequalities in this city aren't because hundreds of people are looking for work. They're because people don't earn enough in the jobs that they're already doing. Because if you can't afford your rent or mortgage payments or find somewhere affordable to live, everything else suffers, as it does if you can't easily access open green space and nature. But just playing the housing numbers game also won't solve this problem, as we've seen for the last 30 years. For example, the building of 250 homes on the Wolvercote paper mill site. Well, that was great if you had upwards of £500,000 to spare to buy one. But you're unlikely to find Oxford teachers, nurses, and lab technicians living there. And where's the data that should be informing this discussion today? What's the proposed balance between new jobs on the one hand and new housing and green spaces in the city on the other? And how has that been reached? In particular, has any of the land previously identified for employment use been firmly reallocated for housing? This was a promised policy change around a common theme in many of the responses in previous consultations. If the plan continues to prioritise a huge increase in employment and economic growth over better provision for housing for the existing population's needs, the housing crisis will continue to worsen, as will all the related infrastructure issues, including flooding, sewage, water scarcity, congestion, pollution, and loss of green space. So how can more of the same strategy that the plan contains, that created and exacerbated these challenges we need to solve, result in anything other than more of the same? And where's the summary report of the responses to the last consultation that should be informing this stage, and the explanation of the changes made in light of that consultation or the reasons for ignoring it? That information should be provided before the plan can be properly considered. The lack of its availability once again undermines democratic process in the city and reinforces residents' feelings that there's no point in participating, nobody listens. And finally, how can you possibly be expected to give full due consideration to this 900-page document in the time given? The fact that the summary of the responses to previous consultation isn't provided because it's also very long simply isn't a good enough reason not to provide it, but rather suggests more time and attention needs to be given to the entire process. What's the rush? Be visionary, be courageous. It's in your gift to request more time, and dare I suggest, a different, more democratically generated plan that's genuinely fit for the future of this city and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Hollingsworth is going to respond.
Thank you very much. Mike, close enough to the microphone? Yes. A brief response. The draft local plan 2045, which we will be debating later, does not prioritise employment over housing. It does not add a single square metre of a new employment site. All that it does on the employment sites is to ensure that if they're going to be used for employment, that use is intensified, which is in line with what the MPPF says, which we have to be compliant with, and what government guidance says, which we have to follow. The draft local plan sets out in policy E1 the employment strategy for the city, which aims to meet the employment needs while also facilitating the delivery of much needed housing. Both the current 2036 local plan, that's the one that's been enforced since June 2020, and the proposed 2045 local plan, which we'll be debating later, make residential development possible, other planning policies such as a flood zone or something similar permitting, on every single employment site in Oxford, every single one. The 2045 local plan indeed goes further and allows for the complete loss of a greater number of employment sites than the 2036 local plan did. What a local plan cannot do is force the owner of a particular site to remove their office, to remove their factory, to remove their hospital, to remove their university, to remove their college, and build housing instead. But it can make it clear that the option is available to them. And the current local plan and the proposed local plan do exactly that. The Wolvercote paper mill site was mentioned. It does actually include, which was overlooked, 95 units of affordable housing, of which I believe 75 are social housing, which is the most affordable form of housing available in this city. The rest of the affordable units are shared ownership. This provides homes that are genuinely affordable to families of all ages, of backgrounds and employment. I don't know the individual residents of every single one of those units, but I do know some of them, and they come from a wide range of backgrounds. Relying on my ability to see the document which says exactly where the flood zones are on Botley Road, that site in Botley Road is in the either the 3A or the 3B floodplain, which makes housing use extremely difficult on a site like that. It is part of the functional floodplain. I think I've covered all the points that were raised.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. So we then have a second public speaker. Thank you. This is Martin Reid. Welcome, and you've got 5 minutes to address us.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm Martin Reid. I'm chair of the Friends of Iffley Village. We're here to request that you remove policy SPS 8, land at Meadow Lane, from the draft new local plan and make the full 2.5 acres available as a local resource for outdoor education and nature connection, with the opportunity of a heritage lottery grant to benefit children and young people and the future resilience of the city. This ancient meadow is unsuitable for any housing. It is now included in Oxfordshire's local nature recovery strategy and easily qualifies as a city wildlife site. It provides the beautiful rural setting for Iffley's conservation area and draws many residents and visitors along the quiet route for active travel bordering the meadow. It brings value it brings environmentally, socially and economically is reflected in the council's own multifunctionality scoring system, where it would score 13 out of 17, and it should be protected as core green infrastructure. This particularly sensitive site is identified by the council's own surveys as unsustainable, with 15 constraints in the sustainability appraisal, which is an underestimate given all the errors and omissions. It is the most constrained of any SPS site in this local plan. In particular, the site policy fails to recognise that the meadow itself is an essential part of the rural conservation area, and any building here would cause significant harm to the conservation area and fail to meet the heritage requirements of the NPPF. The reduction in the minimum housing number from 29 to effectively 0 confirms the site is wholly unsuitable for any housing. Keeping SPS 8 risks the soundness of the entire plan. The council needs to get the balance right. The benefits of housing here would be far outweighed by the multiple harms of development on this irreplaceable site. I'd like to hand over to Jenny Cockram.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I was born in Iffley and have wonderful memories of childhood. I grew up surrounded by open fields. I believe a meadow school on the Horsefields would bring all the things I enjoyed in my childhood. The teachers from local schools within walking distance of the Horsefields say this too, with benefits to mental and physical health, learning social and practical skills and job opportunities, connection between children and communities of different backgrounds, a feeling of belonging in the local landscape. They also say that it would address the high levels of disadvantage of the children in their catchment areas. I am who I am because of the childhood experiences I had in nature. The fields allowed me to be a child, unjudged by adults. I made camps, climbed trees, played games, and explored. I saw birds' nests with eggs in, watched ants' nests. I ran freely, racing and laughing with other children of all backgrounds. We appreciated nature and were happy and healthy. We weren't vitamin D deficient. As a result of enjoying the outside, I have made lifelong friends. I attribute my health and early physical activity. I return mentally to these places that no longer exist when I need space and peace and wish to remember these lovely times. I still get artistic inspiration from childhood visions of these places and from birds and animals I saw, which formed my early imagination. I became a professional gardener as a result of enjoying the outside. I was lucky. Virtually everything apart from the horse fields has now gone. I feel every child should have the opportunities I did. The size of the Horsefields meadow is just large enough at 2.5 acres to take managed footfall while protecting and nurturing the wildlife here. And now we have the support from the local wildlife trust to make this a reality. Over to Eliza Ada from Bebout.
Hi everyone, I'm Eliza. I'm the programme lead for Reconnecting Burnwood, Otmore and the Ray, our new landscape scale programme at Bebout. Bebout are leading the submission of Reconnecting Burnwood, Otmore and the Ray, which we call Arbor, which is a £4.1 million National Lottery Heritage Fund bid with 12 partners across the landscape between Oxford, Bicester and Aylesbury. Our focus is nature, communities and heritage, with a specific focus on reconnection, which aligns perfectly with the Meadow School Iffley proposal. We are working with the organising committee of Friends of Fields Iffley to pilot Meadow School sessions with Greyfriars Catholic School and to draw up a proposal for working with them for our bid. Should our bid be successful, which we hope it will be, we can offer some funds to set up and run the Meadow School, extra capacity and expertise from our 12 partners and wider RBOR stakeholder network. We're very excited to be involved in supporting the development of the Meadow School and are confident in Friends of the Fields Iffley's commitment and ability to develop a brilliant community resource that will last long after our 5-year funding is up. Councillors are asked to take the horse fields off the local plan and co-create the Meadow School.
Right, well, thank you very much to all three of you. And I think, again, Councillor Hollingsworth has a response.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. What's my time limit? Because I fear I too am about to run into it, and I will try and cut short if I need to. There isn't one. I have read what you were going to say, so I will bear that in mind. First of all, just a brief comment. Myself and planning officers had a very useful conversation with Martin and others last week, which was good at identifying where there was agreement and where there is disagreement. And a fundamental issue about where there is disagreement is that planning officers do not agree that there are errors or omissions. And so I wanted to give some context to that. The important background context element here is that the delivery of housing, as we will hear later on, is the priority for the City Council. And the local plan strategy is to maximise housing delivery while balancing protection of other important assets such as biodiversity, open space and functional floodplain. The minimum housing need figure for Oxford, as calculated by the government standard method, is 1,087 new dwellings per annum for 20 years. That's a total of 21,740. And this housing need is clearly, as we all know, greater than the capacity of the city to deliver it. The capacity assessment is 9,267 homes over the local plan period, meaning that there is an unmet housing need of over 12,000, I think it's 12,473 units, which this council will need to look towards our neighbouring councils, so South Oxfordshire, West Oxfordshire, Charwell and Vale of White Horse, in order to meet, which is what we had to do for the last local plan. It is therefore a key requirement, not just a moral obligation to our fellow councils, but also to follow the instructions that we need to for a local plan, to identify all viable housing sites which contribute towards meeting housing need within the city's boundaries. The Meadow Lane site was allocated for residential development in the local plan 2036, and therefore what is being proposed is to continue that in local plan 2045. The sensitivity of the site, which you've heard about from our speakers just now, is acknowledged in the draft allocation policy, including its siting within the conservation area, which of course is designated, and within the local nature recovery strategy, which I'll abbreviate to LNRS hereafter. But there is considered to be potential for a scheme that responds appropriately to these settings, which can be delivering some much needed housing. And this site allocation was drafted with reference to the LNRS. The LNRS does not itself Act has in its draft policy the intention of preventing development. And it says the following is a quote from it, makes this clear. In these circumstances, where allocations for alternative uses overlap with the maxed extent of the LNRS, local planning authorities, councils like us, should seek to plan positively for the delivery of potential measures identified in the LNRS within the proposed development. So it's not a blanket ban on development. In relation to the impact on the conservation area, it is entirely acceptable and commonplace for development to occur within conservation areas. We have, I think, 21 in Oxford, and the substantial majority have had and will continue to have development within them. The principle of developing within a conservation area is acceptable. And this is the important between a designation of a site in a local plan and the actual decision on a planning application. It's important to bear in mind those are different. So whether proposals result in harm to heritage assets is something that can only be properly assessed by development management as officers when a planning application is submitted, and then the decision-making body, whether it is planning officers, whether it's the planning committee or a planning inspector. This site did not meet the criteria to be within the core green infrastructure network. Although the site is within a conservation area, this in itself does not make it part of the core network. It is not currently a designated wildlife site. There is only one small area of the site which is flood risk, and it appears separated from the main green corridor, which is likely to limit its main corridor function. Just to be clear, that is the council's officers' professional view. I appreciate that those addressing us do not agree with it, and it is likely that there will be a debate on it both later today and subsequently. When considering whether to allocate a site, officers have considered what the capacity of the site is for housing delivery, a process that was informed by the most up-to-date information available at the time of drafting. It is clear that the site has sensitivities and biodiversity interest, but there is still potential for a development of the site that responds to this appropriately. Given the current understanding of the wildlife value of the site, the minimum number of dwellings has been removed, as was noted, from the site allocation policy, allowing a free response to the sensitivities of the site. That is not to say a scheme bringing forward the previous minimum would not be suitable, but it does leave that to be determined in the planning decision-making process on a planning application on the site, which is what it should be. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Right, we now move on to agenda item 7 is urgent business, but I believe there is none. So we move to agenda item 8, which is the report on the housing revenue account, the HRA, rent setting for 2026-2027. I call on Councillor Turner to introduce the report.
It's myself.
I do apologise. My running order is wrong. Okay, Councillor Smith, off you go.
I know that when considering this report tonight, all members of this council will be thinking about the cost of living crisis, which continues to make life difficult for too many residents in this city. And I wish we didn't have to increase our rents at all. But that is not an option we can afford to take. The business plan for our housing revenue account sets out the demands on it, and in the coming years we need to maximise income into it in order to fund necessary investment in our existing council properties, in order to run a responsive and good quality repairs service and landlord services, and in order to fund investment in the new council homes, which are desperately needed in Oxford. That's the context for the recommendation before us this evening for an increase of 4.8%, which is arrived at from taking CPI plus 1%. This increase will mean that the average council social rent next year will be £143.40 per week. This is still a genuinely affordable rent and represents continued great value for money for our tenants. I'm also pleased that the government has indicated it will allow council landlords like us to move towards rent convergence between the rents paid by long-term and newer tenants. In the past, rents were calculated differently to how they are today, and they've not kept pace with inflation. And this means that tenants who have been in their homes for many years are often paying considerably less than their neighbours who moved in more recently. We're still waiting for confirmation about the pace of rent convergence that we can take, but this report agrees to increase those legacy rents by up to £2 a week, on top of the 4.8% that all council rents will go up by. And I think that is fair. So I commend this report to council tonight.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Do we have a seconder for that report? Councillor Brown.
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions on this? Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a quick technical question from me. In paragraph 32 of the report, almost every service charge and so on gets similarly sort of inflation uprated. The ones specifically relating to temporary accommodation actually go down by a chunk, which is good for those living in temporary accommodation. But I wonder if you could say a bit about why there's the specific decrease in that area.
Yep, you've spotted some good news for people in temporary accommodation, and God knows that they need some, don't they? Being in that situation. It's thanks to rises in energy costs not rising as much as previously predicted. So that element of the service charge fund is in surplus, so we're able to decrease those energy charges for people in temporary accommodation to align it to the actual costs.
Thanks. Okay, well, in the absence of any other questions, can I just put these recommendations to the vote? Can I see all those in favour of this report? And any against? Any abstentions? No, that's unanimous. Great. Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, the tenancy strategy and tenancy policy. I'm going to call on Councillor Smith to introduce this report.
Thank you. With this report, I'm moving both our tenancy strategy and tenancy policy. As a housing authority, we have a duty to publish our tenancy strategy to set out our requirements and expectations for all registered providers of social housing in our area, including ourselves as a landlord. And as a social landlord ourselves, we are required to publish our tenancy policy to set out how we will comply with that citywide strategy that we've set. The core principles of the new strategy remain consistent with this council's long-standing approach to council housing, to social housing. Namely, we believe tenants should be offered secure or assured social tenancies at social rent where possible, but where that isn't feasible, rent should still be affordable and capped at local housing allowance levels. So typically 60% of a market rent, not the 80%, which is often used nationally as being acceptable for affordable housing. We expect support to be in place for tenants when they need it from social landlords, and this new strategy places greater emphasis on cooperation and strong action to tackle issues including the prevention of homelessness, domestic abuse and antisocial behaviour. And we also expect housing associations to work with the council to make the best use of their available properties. And this is done through the allocation of homes using the shared Oxford Register for Affordable Housing. And we also expect there to be proper procedures in place to assist tenants who are overcrowded, living in unsuitable housing or looking to downsize. The strategy and policy have been subject to public consultation with a particular focus on seeking views from housing associations and our council tenants. It got a good response. I'm pleased that the majority of all the respondents found the documents straightforward to understand and either strongly agreed or agreed with all the proposals. So I hope councillors will too and vote for it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do I have a seconder for this report? Councillor Brown, do you want to speak?
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Then, any questions from members of the council on this? Nope. Excellent. Then, one from Councillor Turner.
Lord Mayor, it was a comment rather than a question. Yeah, no, just to say, I mean, the last bit that Linda mentioned, actually, I mean, I've been really, really impressed and heartened by the degree of tenant engagement with a lot of this work and these policies. And I mean, it was very clear from the presentation we had at the cabinet meeting before last that, you know, that had been a really, really good process. Very, very heartening to see. You know, people are giving up their time freely, and I think it's important we acknowledge and thank people for that, as well as thanking Linda and the officers for making that happen. That was what I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's a very good point. So with that, can I see all those in favour of these recommendations? Thank you. Anyone against? No. Anyone abstaining? No. Excellent. Right. Passed unanimously. Thank you. So then we can move straight on to item number 10, resident involvement and engagement strategy. And once again, busy Councillor Smith.
Follows on nicely from Councillor Turner's comments. Thank you, Lord Mayor. The term resident here covers our tenants, leaseholders and shared owners. And there is a clear expectation from the regulator of social housing now, set out in their transparency, influence and accountability standard, that we are open with all these groups and treat them with fairness and respect so they can access services, raise concerns, influence decision making and hold us as their landlord to account. This is an area where we have to acknowledge that improvement is required. The extensive consultation, which involved more than 400 residents over a summer roadshow, highlighted the relationship between residents and the council as a landlord needs greater focus. And better resident involvement and engagement came second only to building safety in the top 10 list of priorities for our residents. Our tenant satisfaction survey has also told us that only 64% of tenants feel that the council listens to their views and acts upon them. So this strategy is a total reset of our approach going forward. It recognises the tough new regulatory requirements which we're now operating under and the need to step up our efforts to improve resident engagement and ensure that the residents' voice has a central role in policy development and service delivery from now on. And this will require a variety of meaningful engagement platforms and support for residents. And I'm looking forward to attending the first meeting of our new tenant and leaseholder board next month. But if you look at page 15 of the strategy, you'll see that the offer includes plenty of other ways for residents to get involved as well, either in a formal or informal capacity, depending on the commitment that people want to make or are able to make. This strategy is built on 4 principles: resetting relationships, actively listening, responding to priorities, and embedding engagement across the organisation. And it has 5 strategic priorities within it: establishing foundations for engagement, enhancing resident knowledge, co-designing inclusive platforms, improving communication, and what it's all about in the end, delivering high-quality landlord services. Each priority is supported by a detailed action plan which outlines specific initiatives such as training for staff and residents, inclusive ways for residents to get engaged, improved complaint handling, and these actions aim to ensure that services are shaped by resident input and that outcomes are both transparent and measurable. And to monitor success, we'll be tracking participation rates, the diversity of people getting involved, the impact of resident feedback on service delivery, and you might have seen in some of the HRA policies which have been coming forward, very explicit reference to the impact resident engagement processes have already had on those policies. And achievements will be communicated regularly with a focus on building trust, demonstrating improvements in satisfaction and service quality, and we'll be reviewing the strategy annually. So, yeah, I hope everyone can vote for it this evening.
Thank you for that. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have any questions from members of the council on this report? We don't. Good. So, can I see all those in favour of the recommendations in the report? Thank you. Okay, anyone against? Any abstentions? No. Okay, then that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. So we're now moving to item 11, the proposed submission of the draft Oxford local plan. This is going to be quite a complicated debate. We are going to start with potentially Councillor Hollingsworth is going to introduce it. We are then going to take the Green amendments and then the Lib Dem amendments and then the IOA amendments, and we will debate and vote on those as we go along, and then we can have the full debate on the whole amended motion at the end. So I will call on Councillor Hollingsworth to introduce the report.
Before I start, Lord Mayor, can I just check a process question? I am using it. I will speak. Ooh, I will try and get closer to it. Sorry, process question, Lord Mayor. You said in your introduction there are amendments in the Green Group and the Liberal Democrat, which we can see because they're papers. I know there is one agreement from the IOA, which I believe is being put on paper at this point and will be circulated, I hope, while we're debating the other ones. You said in amendments, plural. Is there more than one? I
don't think so. Slip of the tongue.
I'm not seeing David, so again, he's got two now. So, okay, fine. In which case, I will introduce and look forward to seeing the written version of that, and I get a sense of the content anyway. So, this is, I hope, a short-ish debate on what is a very long document, but one that is very important. And I wanted to start by giving my, and I hope everyone else's here, who is a councillor's, huge thanks to our planning policy team. There has been an absolutely monumental effort by the team to produce these documents in very short order, to rewrite them in a way which I think makes them one of the most accessible local plans I've read, and I have read a few. It's much briefer than traditional local plans. It is written in accessible language, and it ties together extremely well. And they produced this on a timescale which is unusual, almost unfeasibly short for doing this amount of work. And I hope, if Council will tolerate this, a small round of applause to those officers now would be most welcome. Thank you. I shall now briefly introduce the actual document itself, which I'm sure everyone has read. But clearly, as a local plan, we need a local plan. We're under a requirement to have one. Every local planning authority, every council that's a local planning authority, and a few other things which aren't councils, is required to have one. Our current one was approved by this full council in June 2020, so we now have a local plan which is slightly more than 5 years old, which means we're technically in breach of our requirement to have one that is no more than 5 years old, so hence the speed and the urgency we've been working to. As I've said in the responses to the two public speakers earlier, there is an issue here which our local plan has always traditionally had to meet, which is how to balance the needs for housing and the needs for our economy. But I would also say, and this is what I think is particularly good about the policies in this, as well as those economic needs and those housing needs, there is a great deal of policy within this, which is, I shall check there isn't a housing inspector listening just in case they object to this. There is a lot which is addressing social needs in this, and I think that is an important part where at all possible a local plan should do that. So you will see references to the housing need figures, and just to repeat those, our housing need for the 20 years of this local plan, 21,740 new dwellings. Our capacity is 9,267. Therefore, the unmet need, which we're going to have to look to our neighbouring districts, as we did last time, is 12,473. That is of fundamental importance that we need to enter into that discussion with them. Clearly, it is going to be to some extent tense, to some extent challenging. This is a difficult relationship to manage. Anyone who's aware of the planning process will be aware of that difficulty. And while all of our neighbouring councils have, in a really professional way, addressed those needs, this is a challenging thing for them to have to address. It's meeting not just their housing need, but some of ours as well. And I think we all must appreciate that is difficult for them as professional planners and also for their politicians who have to face up to that issue. In terms of our policies, we are continuing to maximise as far as we can the importance of affordable housing, particularly priority towards social rent. The policies give an even greater focus on issues around biodiversity, our green and blue infrastructure. If you look at some of the issues around employment, we're really trying our level best to promote local jobs and local businesses, and you will see those reflected, and I'll touch on that when talking about some of the amendments which are tabled but being withdrawn, as to the importance of getting the balance right there. We're trying to do something which we tried to do in our last local plan and it was struck out, so we're having another go to achieve it. Now, I think it's really important. We're also trying to go beyond just affordable housing, which is a crucial importance, but so are affordable workplaces. Ask anybody running a small business in this city, and the lack of affordable workspaces is crucially important. We think we can use our planning system to try and achieve affordable workplaces alongside affordable housing. And finally, I would touch on there is a focus which I think is of fundamental importance. If you look back at our local plans, and indeed local plans in the past, there would be a focus on the city centre and then the rest of the city. Oxford's history, people will be aware, we then moved to having two centres, a city centre with its dreaming spires, and then the Cowley Centre, the city with two centres. It's actually there embedded in our planning history. Over the years, we have added our district centres, so Summertown, Headington, and so on and so forth. What we are trying to do with this is to go further, and further than government requirements and the NPPF advice says is required, by making sure we focus in on local centres and neighbourhood centres. I think it sends a fundamentally important message that many of us discovered during 2020 and what happened with COVID, that the places that we live, those neighbourhoods, are walking distances. There are many terms which people use which become internationally controversial. I'm not proposing to use them now, but we can all see with our own communities that we represent as councillors, the communities where we live, the importance of having that closeness of not just homes, but also the places where we can shop, the places where we can enjoy leisure, that we can enjoy community contact with our neighbours, with our friends, with our visitors. And that is in this local plan, and I think is a really fundamentally important part of it. So, turning to the amendments, I wanted to particularly thank Lois, Rosie and Chris, and David, who has appeared rather late in the day, but with his amendment. It's been helpful to know what the amendments are. So what I propose to do is to accept a considerable number. I shall go through them one amendment at a time, or one element of the amendment at a time. I want to accept them because I think they either slightly clarify, give a slightly different not a different interpretation of the policy, but a slightly different context, which helps to explain it. One could feel whether it's an improvement or slightly worse, depending on your point of view. I don't think that's of any significance and importance. I think what matters is that we're trying to say much the same things in ever so slightly different ways, and I think that's important. So, going through the green amendments first, because there were more of them, so I started with that list. I would like to accept the element which is Amendment 1, Amendment 2B, Amendment 2C, Amendment 4, Amendment 5A, and Amendment 6, which is the one which adds the word pubs, which I think many of us will find is a very positive, probably not entirely necessary in planning terms, but a very nice word to include. I'm gazing at green just to make sure I haven't got that wrong. Right, I haven't. I understand that the green amendment will withdraw amendment 2A, amendment 2D, and you will have gathered from my introduction why I really pleased this one is withdrawn, amendment 5B. So thank you for that, which I believe leaves us, and I will obviously, when they come to introduce, they will do that, amendments 3A and 3B to debate. On the Liberal Democrat amendments, there are 3. Yes, please tell me I'm correct on that. And I'm going on numerical order, because I can't remember whether they have numbers or not, but I'll go, I hope, in the correct order. Amendment 1 on the planning, on the parking policy. I'm not going to accept it because I'm not quite clear what the purpose is. But I would say to council if they could listen to what is moved and then come to a decision on whether they think it is an improvement or it's not to the issues there. I'll touch on it ever so slightly in summary as to the issue. Second amendment was going to be a change to housing policy H6, which I believe has been withdrawn. So no comment from me on that. And then amendment 3 is a proposal to add an additional line to the site policy. And I can't remember the site policy, but it's the Diamond Place site policy, which is to make sure that the public toilets which are there are reflected in that policy. Both myself and officers think that's an enhancement, and therefore I accept it. On the IOA amendment, is going to propose, I haven't seen the wording, but I think the general gist is that it will propose the removal of the particular site, which we had a public speaker on. I iterated in my response to that why I think that is, it doesn't make a huge difference to the numbers of houses. What it does do is, I think, is it reflects very badly our relationship with our fellow district councillors. It's effectively saying to them, we have unmet housing need, but it's too difficult for us to handle it. It's your problem, and I don't think that's appropriate. I am fully aware, and I'm very aware for the level of and the technical issues that have been raised, that as you would expect with a challenging or contentious site, there will be a part of the planning hearing with a planning inspector, which will look at these issues. And it feels to me that that is where allowing the experts to, both for and against the inclusion of that site, should be able to resolve the issue. I don't feel it's appropriate for us to, because I think it then undermines what our officers will be doing in making a case that we are looking at our housing need in an appropriate way. It will look as if we are not doing it in an appropriate way. So it's not a reflection on the challenging issues that were raised. I quite understand those and why it's been moved, but I do think it sends an inappropriate message. So I would like to signal that I don't accept that amendment. Is that everything that you needed, Lord Mayor, in order to get us to the next stage of debate?
I think it is, thank you.
Jolly
yes. 1 second. Do I have a seconder? Who, sort of a formal one, you can speak later.
I would be very delighted to formally second the local plan, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Jafari Marbini, is this... Yes, what's your hand up for?
I had a question as to when a question might be appropriate, not an amendment, but just a question on the text.
Probably after we've talked about the amendments.
I think if it's not on one of the amendments, it might be helpful to have the question after the voting on the amendments has happened. If it then generates you wanting to move something, then we'll have to do a small pause, but I think that would be appropriate. Would that be acceptable?
Great. Okay. Thank you. Right. So in that case, I call on, I think it's going to be Councillor Roll to introduce those amendments that have that have not been accepted or withdrawn. So that's 3A and 3B.
Thank you. Firstly, we just wanted to thank officers for their support in the amendment drafting process, particularly David Butler for their help, and also thank Councillor Hollingsworth for his engagement with us on this, and also the Labour Group's acceptance of those 6 proposed amendments. Together, these accepted amendments, we believe, strengthen our commitment to building a fairer, greener Oxford. They set out a vision of building local district and city centres that promote community cohesion, health and well-being. We're talking about promoting developments in the city and local neighbourhoods that generate real value to communities. We're making clear that pubs are vital social hubs and valuable cultural venues that should be offered strong protections. On making Oxford a fairer city, these amendments strengthen our commitment to promoting the Oxford living wage across the city. We're encouraging developers to ensure workers are paid the Oxford living wage as a minimum standard of decent livable pay, including apprentices where it's possible. On making Oxford a greener city, we're making clear that the renewable energy projects should be especially welcomed where they are owned in part or wholly by the community. Through this model, profits are not lost to private entities. Communities take democratic control over their energy future, generating, using, owning, investing and saving money in their communities. And lastly, these accepted amendments look out for those who are sometimes overlooked, welcoming new mooring sites for boat dwellers given the additional needs known across Oxfordshire. Following the Labour Group's accepting those amendments, and as we've heard, and ourselves dropping 2A, 2D and 5B, there are now just 2 remaining in our original proposal that have yet to be debated, and we invite you all to support these 2. These focus on protecting and expanding our city's provision of playgrounds. There will be 2 individual votes on these, I understand, but we're debating these as a whole. So firstly, 3A, where we have made slight self-amends, this adds in stronger protection for existing playgrounds in our city. The new policy would state that planning permission would not be granted for development that results in the loss of playground space or other infrastructure, etc., where this would have a significant adverse impact on public amenity or ecological interest. Here, the intention is to still allow for much-needed housing to be built on disused playgrounds where there's no longer need for it, but not where they are still in use and valuable community assets. Secondly, 3B speaks very much to the community calls for a playground in the city centre. As has been highlighted by community campaigns, the absence of playgrounds in the city centre means that children do not have free, safe and secure environment to play, which is a barrier to families spending a lot of time in the city centre. No doubt there are many areas in the city where there is also a lack of provision in neighbourhoods, but the city centre is quite unique, we think, in that most people and families across the city tend to visit and therefore make use of this. In November 2024, Council voted in support of the principle of creating a children's playground in the city centre. This amendment seeks to carry through that commitment in the local plan and invites developers to help resolve that deficit, whether it be through one large playground or many tiny pocket parks or all of the above. We hope that you support both of these 2 amendments and encourage greater protections for playgrounds in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? And would you like to speak now or reserve your right? Thank you, Councillor Mudman, to speak later. Right, so I'll open this up to debate, and I will take hands as I see them. Okay, Councillor Smoten, Councillor Miles.
Cool. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. First of all, let me join in thanking our hard-working planning officers for their valuable time in examining the amendments submitted to Council today. There's a lot of email ink spilled that is not immediately obvious unless you were involved in that process. So many thanks for all of their time and effort there. On the amendment, I think the point made about the loss of playground space is welcome. I note officers' concerns about potential issues decommissioning a genuinely unused play space, but I think the policy's existing wording about adverse impact should provide an appropriate escape hatch in that event, because in that case there would be no impact because of the fact that the play space is disused. The argument would be readily makeable in that circumstance. I also note that we do see cases at Planning Committee where policies are, technically speaking, violated outright, but nonetheless that the decision the committee comes to is that this is overall beneficial, despite technical non-compliance in certain respects. So I don't think there should be too much of a problem there. The point about city centre play space is a very welcome reminder. We definitely do have a deficit in such play space, which is why we had a relevant allocation in our budget amendment last year. I'll underscore that play space is also extremely welcome wherever there is a deficit in play space, although I note a central play space is unique in that it would be designed to serve not just residents, like most play spaces, but also shoppers and visitors to the city. I would expect and hope that planning permission wouldn't be a substantial obstacle here, but if one were to arise, then a nudge against that is very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, I also welcome the amendments focusing on play space, and just want to remind us all that we have talked about this multiple times. In fact, at the previous local plan debate as well, this topic came up. Internationally, the rights of the child focus on planning as a tool to promote child's play, and what the local plan is doing, it's a planning document for the city. And so if we're looking at promoting the rights of children in our city, creating space for them to play is something that responds to this international framework that promotes children's rights as well. As a parent, I support this. I think it is really important that any play space is in the very city middle of the city, whether that's play on the way or a larger play space. I know that in some of the conversations where we've been raising this at Scrutiny and other forums, there's been discussion about whether Oxford would, have some play space, and would that be sufficient? And really, it wouldn't be. Only a few weeks ago, my children were asking what happened to the playground that they thought was coming to the city centre, based on the motion that we put forward, and we received full council support from that was referenced in November 2024. So yeah, look forward to supporting this motion, and also look forward to realising this vision that I think we all share. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'd like to speak on Amendment 3A, and I do have some concerns about this because as a councillor with a ward which has an awful lot of play spaces, many of which are now disused and many of which are bordering on being disused, I would be really concerned if some of the really good work that we've been able to do over a number of years in terms of building very much needed affordable homes in some of those playground spaces were to be prevented by this amendment, which I fear it might be. They have been a source, many of these playgrounds, of antisocial behaviour, serious antisocial behaviour in a number of cases over many years, and actually local residents really welcome they're being turned into housing sites where they can see good use being made of the space, whereas previously they were being used for all sorts of nefarious purposes. And that remains a significant issue, unfortunately, in large parts of our city. Where big estates were built in the past, pretty much every corner of every close had a very small or sometimes actually quite large play area. Over time, they have not been used in the way that was originally intended. So I understand the purpose of this amendment. I just feel it might have unintended consequences to our ability to actually make areas really livable for people and to build much needed affordable homes. So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Jafari Marbini.
I'll be supporting this amendment largely because I do think that in this cost of living crisis, there's a real issue of finding affordable things to do with families and with young people. I do think playgrounds can also be designed much more innovatively so that slightly older children can skate parks, etc. There are things that can be done so that older children also have some activities to do. People in Blackburn Leys and Northfield Brook often say that there's nothing affordable to do in the city centre. They often don't come into town. I do think that having spaces where things can be done that you don't have to pay for, I'm sure would be very welcome. So I'd be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
You, Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To my surprise, I wouldn't say that very easily. I agree the concern Councillor Brown has just raised. I mean, I'm obviously missing something here, and I'm probably getting older in my life, but I brought up three young children where I used to take them to local park where we lived. And this city, once time when I was sitting on this side, we had this strategy to have done the reorganization of the parks, and where we created so many parks, which now by the Regal, which is in Iffley Field now, and then you got a brand new in the ward I represent. But am I missing something? I mean, city center, would you take your little child nowadays, maybe nowadays the modern parents do. Well, let's go to city centre, I'll take you to a children play area. I mean, you go to do your necessities, etc., visit, look at the building or doing shopping, etc. I mean, I'm missing something here, which obviously, person, when they sum up, they can tell me. And due respect, when last time somebody came and spoke and passed the motion, and a couple of my constituents write to me and they said, what do your colleague drink or smoke? And what do they think? I mean, what's going on in the city centre? So I will not be supporting this amendment on that reason, because obviously I'm missing something here. Any state, any in the city, we have many play areas. Wouldn't you take your children there? Or would you, wherever you live in a Barton or Blackbullies, I bring my children to city centre, let's take you to the play area. There's a nice play area there. And equally, I do not want to see a mess what we have made in a Broad Street. You know, we can beat up all the drums, but in reality, it's an eyesore. So I would like my city centre to basically have a vision where people can come and enjoy those spaces instead of having some wooden boxes fit in somewhere.
Thank you. Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Chair. So it wasn't so long ago, members, that you voted unanimously for a play area, I believe, in the city centre. And not so long ago, in Armstrong Road in Littlemore, we are without playing spaces. We have actually very few areas of support for our young people in Littlemore. So I will be supporting this motion. I think protecting our green spaces is an imperative thing that we need to do for our young children and for our adults as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith. Oh. Right. Okay. Gosh. Thank you for that. Right. Sorry, Lema. And members, yeah, I'm off now. Thank you. I think really having some play area in the city centre, something for children to play on, while parents are visiting, or visitors from overseas are with a family outing in the city centre. It's a good idea, in fact, actually. Think of the social and economic value of having play areas. That's important as well, too. I do agree, actually, with David with regard to play areas nearer homes as well, too, residents. That's important. And I think the leader was mentioning areas that small areas, I think, within her own division that were considered unsuitable as play areas for various reasons that had then now been utilised to make two bungalows, in fact, actually, which is good for social housing. That's great. I understand that. But there's also areas that have been built on that a green space area just off Girdleston Road, right next to a special site of the Lye Valley, where building was allowed there, despite objections from local people and from the Friends of the Valley group, which I think, is wrong, because they lost green space there. We're talking about the city centre area and about this motion. Can we hear what... Can I just finish? Can I just finish, please? Could I just finish, Lord Mayor? We have to hear the point of order.
Sorry.
Right, okay. Sorry.
Point of order, I just need to correct that, but that was not a play space, it was an old garage site.
That's not a point of order, so please carry on.
Right,
Smith.
thank
you. I can point to the space on a map for the councillor if she would like. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll just finish by saying I do support this amendment to this evening and will be supporting it because I do believe it's important, actually, for children and families who are either visitors or residents supporting the economic side of the city centre. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Mundy.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's a point well made about ensuring that we don't simply say, well, we need a playground space in the city centre and that all other parts of the city are replete with play spaces. So obviously, that's not to say that at all, but we are definitely deprived of play space here in the city centre, and I think it's easy to forget that because of how much green space here is controlled by the colleges. I think it's always worth pointing that out, because there's as much as it's welcome to obviously have the beautiful park at University Parks, but it's not it's not a play space for children in the main. There's certainly no play equipment there, and it's not a public provision in as much as it being solely for the use of members of the public. So the other point I wanted to raise was that it's easy to sort of speak for children and speak about play spaces in the context of speaking for children without obviously any of us being children. And I think sometimes we sort of forget what it's like. I mean, you don't just take a child to the city centre and say we're shopping for the next 3 hours and they think, yeah, that's great. I'm just going to accept that and I'm not going to demand to go and play or do something completely different than walk around TK Maxx or whatever. Other shops are available, obviously. So, you know, the really important point is that, you know, play spaces are for our children to enjoy, you know, and their enjoyment of those spaces does not happen at the timescales that we really set for those people. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, so before I was on this council, the council voted unanimously in favour of City Centre Playground, but I would have voted in favour of that motion anyway. But my problem with Amendment 3B isn't that it would provide for a City Centre Playground, it's that it sort of only talks about the city centre. I mean, in the report, the officers even said that the council will in particular welcome proposals for a play space within the city centre, or, I mean, you could have instead said the city centre especially has a deficit of high-quality accessible playgrounds. And so I think my problem with the two amendments are that they talk about the entirety of the council area all as one, when in reality I think different areas have different needs. And so I'm going to be opposed to both of the amendments, unfortunately. Although I mean I totally understand why you put them forward, but on that reasoning I'm going to oppose both of the amendments.
Thank you. Councillor Tino?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of the comments that Councillor Brown made, that there are many parts of the city where there are playgrounds that have now become areas where there's just huge amounts of antisocial behaviour, and there are potentially other areas where that might be about to happen. I can think in Councillor Malik in Westfield Close, you've got a playground that causes a lot of problems, no play equipment there, and I can think in Councillor Remal in Lye Valley, several places like that. So I think all over the city there are some spaces which are causing residents and tenants problems, and one of the solutions would be to build housing there that will put an end to or stop or limit that amount of antisocial behaviour. So I think the concern is that the 3A policy might make that more difficult, and then we might end up with places that are no longer played in and just places where people deal drugs and commit crimes. So I think we need to read what the officers have said about that and be cautious about that, and I think that's why we should vote against 3A.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt?
I think it's commendable to talk about children needing to play in the city centre. I think one of my longest conversations as a city councillor has been about the need for redoing the entire city centre, Broad Street in particular, so that it's a cultural hub, so that we have these chessboards that we've talked about, so that we can actually start focusing on pedestrianisation, bringing people together across the generations to the city centre. I think is very important. And talking about the city centre playground is one way that flags what's actually needed on Broad Street, which is this complete overhaul and redoing of the entire area. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Raymond?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First of all, I think everybody here is in favour of more green spaces. I don't think that's in dispute with anybody. I'm concerned about 3A, about ponds and other things. I think that already in planning terms, with what we had with biodiversity, is quite all very well covered. So I think that you're just placing a straitjacket with developers in the city centre where it's really expensive. And we have lots of amenity spaces already in the city centre. I mean, the Westgate provides stuff, other shops and places buy stuff. So I think that actually most of the stuff that you're concerned about is already covered in planning terms as already. And that this just makes it difficult for developers to build in the city centre where it's really expensive. And we should be concentrating On providing green spaces where they're more feasible, I take the point that Councillor Mundy said that children want to play when they want to play, and we shouldn't dictate to them when they should play. But I think that if adults are responsible and organise themselves a little bit, I'm sure that they could come up with a family arrangement that would work.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try and be very brief. Just to respond to Councillor Brown and Councillor Attino's concerns around antisocial behaviour and crime, I think the real problem with this opposition to the amendment is that those terms of antisocial behaviour are very nebulously defined, and they can apply to a wide range of often very middle-class sensibilities around what sorts of behaviour are deemed to be permissible or not. And we know there is a very strong evidence base for the benefits of play spaces for children's learning, development, physical and mental health. And I think we should be making this policy decision on the basis of evidence rather than spurious concerns about deviant behaviour.
Right, thank you.
Drug dealing and people having sex.
I think
in
we
public
now
places.
are left with, if there's no one else wanting to speak, can you speak in this one?
You might respond, but do I do the responding now or after?
You can respond to the amendment, but do we need to let Councillor Mudman give her? You can have a point of order. What's your point of order?
There seems to be quite a lot of, whenever something is said that Labour benchers seem to dislike, they seem to just say the answer out loud. Is it possible to go through the chair, please? Is it possible to go through the chair?
Okay, which rule in the Constitution do you feel that's breaking?
Going through the chair for comments, because there's been quite a lot of comments when, sorry, Councillor over there was speaking.
Good point.
And just
Thank you very much.
Thank
Please make all comments through the chair. So now we are at, I think, does Councillor Mudman can sum up on her amendment before the proposer gets to reply? Is that the right order, Emma?
Alex first and then Lewis.
Alex and then Lewis. Okay, so Alex first to respond, and then Councillor Mudman gets the last word.
Right. Thank you very much. I genuinely wasn't sure, and there are so many pages in the Constitution, I've lost all ability to find anything in it. Right. On the two amendments, I should say the reasons why I didn't accept them, and then I leave it up to Council to decide. On Amendment 3A, as you will have heard from a number of people who represent wards where these sites are problematic, there are sites which used to be play areas, no longer are play areas. No small children or their families go anywhere near them. What happens on them is hardcore antisocial behaviour, not mildly disruptive, but deeply illegal. We have used some of those sites, particularly on the HRA, to turn them into affordable housing, sometimes specialist housing for people who are disabled, things like that, which are appropriate on what are tricky sites to develop. My concern was particularly on the original draft, and I appreciate, and I'm sure Lois will touch on this, it's been slightly redrafted. I still have a bit of a concern, it's just not as big as it was, that actually this potentially makes it impossible for the HRA to do this kind of specialist development. I think it makes it difficult, and somebody, Councillor Smoten possibly, was raising the point about how the 2004 Act on planning works, that you take into account the development plan, the local plan, and material considerations, and that's a really important point. But I'm still remained concerned that it potentially makes things difficult, particularly for our HRA and for other forms of social housing schemes. So that's why I will vote against it, but I appreciate you will make a definitive argument and others may agree with you. Don't know. On 3B, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference to the policy, and I need to emphasise this is a local plan. This is not a play area strategy document. It will not make any difference to the deliverability of a play area on Broad Street. Broad Street, if it requires planning permission, it will have to apply for planning permission. It will also have to get permission from the Highways Authority. It will have to grant that permission to allow that to happen. What concerns me about this is there are parts of the city where there are plenty of play areas. In fact, I touched on that with 3A. There are other parts, not just the city centre, that are short. It was mentioned to me around the Cowley Centre, for example, there's an element of a shortage there. What concerns me about this particular wording is it goes back to where we were in old local plans of going, Oxford is a city and the important bit is the city centre with its dreaming spires and visitors. And I think that is wrong. So I will be voting against this because the policies are very clear. They are extremely supportive of play areas, and that is the right thing to be doing, but across the whole city, not just picking out one bit and saying it's more important there. So it's a nuanced thing. I accept that, and I think people will form their own opinions on it, but that's why I'll be voting against it. And I think I appreciate that wasn't necessarily the intention, but I think it's still there in the wording, and so there we are.
Thank you. So finally, Councillor Muddiman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for all the comments, both positive and negative, but obviously thank you very much for the positive ones. So we'd like to address some of those points. Particularly, I think many of the colleagues opposite have raised the issue that they think it would make housing development more difficult. We push back on that because the wording is very definitely that planning permission will not be granted for development that results in the loss of playground space or other green infrastructure, if that were to have a significant adverse impact upon public amenity or ecological interest. So we think that that gives you, that phrase at the end of this clause gives you the get-out clause to say where you think it would not have an impact on public amenity, i.e. it's a rubbish old play area that is not being used or it's full of drug dealers, then planning permission would be granted. So we feel that we've covered that and that is in. And obviously we share your desire for more affordable housing, and we definitely wouldn't want to do something that we thought would stop that. Sarge. So firstly, just I don't smoke and I only drink a little, so just to put that in. And I certainly didn't write this when I was under the influence of anything, okay? So I'd just like to point that out. But I do think you are missing a point, and I think Ed, Councillor Mundy raised that, and clearly it's probably as long for you as me, maybe, that you were last in town with small children. But the point of, one of the points of the city centre policy is that very often you're in town with small children and it is hard to entertain them when you've got a lot of shopping to do. And certainly one of the things I saw on a recent visit to Copenhagen was really, really well thought out, lots and lots of very small, little tiny park areas in really sensible places where parents have to wait, like near bus stops, like outside the library, where it just makes life easier for parents. So yes, I wasn't on the influence, and yes, I do think you have missed the point. David, yes, thank you for your support. Councillor Mundy, yes, as I've said, thank you. And I think as probably the person with the youngest child in the in the chamber, I think this is particularly, obviously, very, very relevant to you. James, I think we've, Councillor Taylor, I think your issue was similar to Councillor Brown's, and I think I've covered that. I would particularly like to point out on the city centre part of this policy 3B that we are not saying, as Councillor Hollingsworth possibly suggested, that we think the city centre is more important, that it's more important to have play centres here. That is not what we mean, and that we do not think that is what the policy says. But we do think there is a need in the city centre because there is so little. And as other councillors have said, if you look down from above on a map of the city, there are so many green spaces that are not accessible to the general public, that are only accessible to colleges and to the students. So we do feel a particular need in the city. That is not to say we think there is not a need or that it is more important than the need in other communities and other areas. Councillor Hunt, thank you for your support. And Councillor Raymond, I think you were mixing up the two policies or you suggested the bit about hedges and ponds, but actually that's already there. We didn't add that. That bit is already there. Our amendment does not alter that. Okay, our amendment is just about the other things. Okay, I think I've responded to everything, so I urge you to vote for our amendment. I understand we're going to be voting for it in two parts, on 3A and then on 3B. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are now going to vote on these two amendments separately. The first one, which is 3A, about the preventing the net loss of playground space. Okay, so can I see all those in favour of this amendment? Very close. Okay, can I see all those against this? Okay, all right. Okay, and thank you. Put your hands down. Do we have any abstentions? One. Thank you. Okay. Complex mathematics going on. Okay, the result is 20 voted for this, and 22 voted against, with one abstention. So that amendment falls. Okay, so we will now vote on Amendment 2, which is 3B, encouraging the provision of a city centre playground. Okay, can I see all those in favour of this amendment? Oh, oh.
That's not...
Just reading the title of it as it was in, just the new bullet point about the city centre has a deficit of high quality accessible playgrounds, and the council will welcome applications that seek to resolve or contribute to the resolving of this deficit. Okay, so can I see all of those in favour of adding that new bullet point? Thank you. Hands down. And now all those against that. That bullet point. Thank you. And any abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. That amendment is carried. So that will be added. Right, so we now move on to the amendments from the Liberal Democrat Party, which I believe are going to be proposed. I've got Councillor Miles here, is that right? No, she looks terrified. No, sorry.
I think there's actually a blank space in the agenda. I've written something. I don't believe Catherine's got words in front of her, so if you don't mind, I'll propose. So, right, let's remind everybody what we're talking about, because it feels like it's been 3/4 of an hour since we had the intro. Right, we submitted 2 amendments, the second of which is withdrawn. That means this debate is solely about the stuff that relates to cycle parking, not anything relating to H6 and split dwellings and so on. Right, okay, so what the amendment does, it does two fundamental things. One of them is about quality of cycle parking provision, for which it cites out to LTN 120 with regard to the physical design of cycle parking. It is more complicated than this, but a brief précis is that generally speaking, it's asking you to supply Sheffield stands and not wheel pinchers, which are rather the bike thief's dream. The second thing it does is to do with the quantum of cycle parking that should be provided for certain kinds of development, and specifically raising the quantum where otherwise this local plan would specify a lower level than the existing local plan 2036. There are 4 categories where it would definitely or could do that, those being C1 hotels, junior schools, senior schools, and other educational establishments. I'll stress again that this is restoring the existing level as it stands in Local Plan 2036 for all of those categories. So firstly, I would contend, and I hope we'd all agree, that the actual requirement for cycle parking at all those classes of development has not fallen relative to when Local Plan 2036 was examined, which I believe was 2018 or 2019, before my time anyway. Secondly, I would note, I acknowledge Officer's point that this differs then from the minima that are set out by the County Council. However, I would stress that the county's document specifies minima, and it is absolutely permissible to set a higher level than is set out in that document. I also acknowledge Officer's point that this requires us to be able to evidence the levels that are proposed. However, I note that, again, the levels that are proposed are levels that were present in Local Plan 2036, which implies that those levels were evidenced correctly at that time, or certainly to the satisfaction of the examiner at that time. These are levels which have passed examination again. So whilst I acknowledge it's easier just to cite out to the county's document, we definitely have shown that we can show that these are reasonable levels. And I think on the face of it are wholly reasonable levels when you look at the actual use of cycle parking in schools in Oxford, where that cycle parking is certainly, in my experience as a school governor, really very well used. And I should hope that it would continue to be so. So that's what we're trying to do, cycle parking standards in terms of quantity and in terms of quality. I hope you'd all please support the amendment.
Thank you. So seconding that, I have Councillor Foulweather down. He also looks confused rather than terrified, but do we have a second? You can do it formally and speak later. Thank you. In that case, I'll open this up to the floor for debate. Any comments from members of the council? Councillor Henwood.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this forward. I think cycle parking is an important element of the city's infrastructure. Strategically, what I would like to see is cycle parking very near bus stops. That way you're connecting the city in a network where people can cycle to a bus stop, take a longer journey, return, and then cycle home. So I would like to see that incorporated in a wider strategy for Oxford, along with parking at major sites, including community centres, for example, as well. So I do welcome this, and I will be supporting.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I would like to support this amendment. The Vale of White Horse District Council area has had a similar policy of putting bike stands near bus stops. In fact, I was instrumental in putting that forward, in fact, many years ago. It does work. It's joined up travel. You can cycle from your house to the bus stop, park your bike on a Sheffield stand, preferably, not one of these ones which has been described, I think, by my colleague as squidging your front wheel, not one that's wanted. We have to put between two bits of metal. It's much better to lock it to something substantial by the bus stop. So absolutely, would love to see more of those and more cycle states, and also cycle parking for cargo bikes too, please.
Right. Anyone else before I go to Councillor Hollingsworth? Councillor Miles.
I just want to remind everyone, we spent a lot of time at the last local plan discussion when it went the consultation inspection last time and then got pushed back when we discussed specific requirements around bike parking for different categories of development. And the reason why we did this was because we as a city council, but along with the county council, have got very tough targets in terms of increasing the number of journeys that are taken by bike within the city. And I think what's really important is that we ensure that the pressure is put on the responsibility is put on developers to provide this rather than retrospectively trying to install cycle parking to meet these demand from residents and visitors at a later date. It took a very long time to retrospectively get additional cycle parking put in Summertown, and so I know how hard and how long that can be to just get a very small amount of cycle parking retrospectively put in. So ensuring developers have to actually put in adequate cycle parking at the time of the development, I think is really important. It's our responsibility as a council to set that framework for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm all up for cycle parking, but I have a question. Probably maybe Councillor Hollingsworth can answer it. I mean, before we vote in. I mean, what just Councillor Henwood said about having the cycle parking next to the bus stops, I'm just picturing St. Alders just outside here. And if you put that in the local plan, and then tomorrow somebody turn up, this is in your local plan, I want a cycle parking just out there. It's just, there are bus stops next to each other. People can hardly stand there. So I don't know where we're going to park the bikes there. So as long as it means a broader in the city, you require the cycle parking, I will love for it. But if that means putting the bus stop in there, and then every bus stop, people are waiting to get on the bus, and where are you going to park the bike? So that is a question, actually, more than anything. I don't know who can answer that.
Go, Councillor Raymond, before we come back to Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, I think I might be missing something on this one. So at the moment, the plan as proposed says it will follow the county standards, and I'm assuming they've done a lot of work on it, as it says. The numbers that the proposed amendment said, maybe Councillor Hollingsworth will be able to answer that question, is where those numbers have come from, and is there any justification behind them? So I'll be happy to hear, hopeful to hear the answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'm going to hand over to Alex to reply before we go to Councillor Fairweather to sum up.
Right.
I think that's me summing up, isn't it?
I think it's Councillor Smoten who's summing up, I believe. Anyway, we'll come to that in a minute. Right, so two or three things just to pick up on. I'll try and answer the questions if I possibly can. The first thing is this is a policy in the local plan to apply cycle parking standards to new developments. It's got nothing to do with cycle parking at bus stops. It's got nothing to do with cycle parking by the side of the road. It is, if somebody is proposing to build a new secondary school, they must provide X amount, I'm squinting slightly, but whatever the amount, you can say what it is, the amount of spaces. If somebody is building a new hotel, they must provide X number of spaces, and a higher education establishment, a further education establishment, and so on. The chances of there being a new secondary school in Oxford, I think, are negligible, so I don't think that is likely to happen. Primary school, also negligible, but maybe not. But certainly some of those other things around further education, higher education, distinctly possible, and so it would apply to them. So just to be clear, this is a local plan, this is a policy on something which is a planning application for a big thing. It is not something else which would have to be addressed through other documents. The issue, as has been touched on, is in the officer response to the proposal, is that what we were going to do as a council is to take to the planning inspector and say, Oxfordshire County Council, the Transport Authority, has done excellent work on coming up with its parking standard. It has evidence which supports it, which is crucial, because if there isn't evidence, then we have a problem, because the inspector will strike out the policy or some element of it. And we have a good working relationship with the county council on this, and you know, I don't know for definite how they will be. They might be mildly put out at being told that their policy isn't good enough, and that we need to do on something else. If we do pass this amendment, then clearly our planning officers will need to. We can't just dig out the evidence from the 2036 plan. We'll have to generate new evidence. So there will be a work resource implication. They will need to go and do the work in order to generate it. One hopes that it will then support these figures, as opposed to, it's slightly odd to arrive at the answer but then go out and seek the evidence afterwards, but there we are. That's where we are. And if it isn't forthcoming, then potentially the county council might say at the planning hearing, could you rely on our evidence and our policy, because we actually went through that and it's more reliable. I understand the rationale for using the 2036 figures. Equally, I understand the rationale of using the evidence which backs up Oxfordshire County Council's policy. I will await to hear the summary to see whether I'm going to be convinced enough to change my mind. I think it's unlikely, but I appreciate many other people might.
Okay, we've got Councillor Fairweather who reserved his right to reply, and then yes, Councillor Smoten can. So I just have one quick question for the planning officers, which is this, if we did adopt this and you had to go and get some more evidence, how much of a delay would that introduce into us submitting the local plan, and will it interfere with that timetable? Because I think that could be quite pertinent. Councillor Fairweather.
As you might expect, I support this amendment. The suggested reduction in standards from the last local plan is very regrettable. Cycle parking is vital to encourage cycling in the city, and cyclists need secure parking for their bikes. And Sheffield stands are essential rather than the wheel pinchers that people have talked about. I don't think anyone is suggesting that cycle parking is sensible next to crowded pavements in the city centre, or even city centre bus stops. As my colleague has pointed out, it makes sense to do this further out from the city centre, so that people can cycle into the edge of Oxford and then catch a bus knowing their bike is secured. Please support our amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smoten.
Shall I proceed to sum up? Right. Okay. A few things to address then. First of all, why deviate from the county document? I think a really important thing to understand about that document is that when it comes to residential, it sets general county standards, and it then specifically addresses the City of Oxford, recognising the City of Oxford to be a place where there is considerably more cycling than elsewhere in the county, much to our credit, and long may it continue. When it comes to non-residential, it doesn't. It only sets one set of county-wide standards. It would be ideal if it had then, for non-residential, also specifically considered the city. I'd argue that it should have done. And I would further argue that we should fill that gap in setting our own standards. Secondly, I'll address the point that was raised about it being fairly unlikely that we're going to see a planning application to build a whole new secondary school. That is absolutely the case. However, it would not seem beyond the realm of possibility to see an application to reallocate land within an existing secondary school, and you'd then want to consider, is it or is it not permissible to build over some of the space which is currently cycle parking, or how much ought to be provided in the remodelled land layout of that school. And similarly, you might see an expansion of an existing site of some sort or another, were that to be necessary, especially when you consider that there's growth likely to be happening in the near future towards the edge of the city, and some of whom it would not be surprising to find attending schools within the boundary of Oxford City. I think it would also be beneficial to maintain the precedent, effectively, that we have from Local Plan 2036 and to keep that standard consistent so that when the new authority is coming to draw up its local plan, it faces a history where the standard has been consistent from plan to plan rather than it having fallen from Local Plan 2036 to Local Plan 2045. That would seem like a negative precedent if it were to serve as any precedent at all. Finally, bus stops and so on. Very interesting idea. Let's absolutely stress to everybody in the room that it's not on the table today. I think it's a very interesting conversation to have at a later point, but right now the vote is solely upon, one, should we restore the quantum to the levels in Local Plan 2036 for educational establishments and hotels, and two, should we cite out to LTN 120 for the design of cycle infrastructure, which is broadly speaking emphasising the Sheffield stand over the wheel pincher. Those are the things that are on the table, and I would urge you all to please vote in favour.
Right. Thank you very much for that summary. Okay, so we are now going to go to a vote on this amendment. Okay, so can I see all of those in favour? Okay. Thank you. And can I see all of those against? Yeah. Okay. And any abstentions? Susan, you've got your hand still up. 1.5 abstentions. Okay. Okay. Just waiting for confirmation, but yeah. 24-17 against. That is carried. That amendment. Thank you. Right. Which Councillor Hollingsworth?
I missed something out in my introduction, which I think I need to include. I apologise. Nothing to do with either the amendment nor about David's amendment. I think that's going to be touched on. There is in the papers a reference to a scrutiny recommendation. I did bring that up. It's on page, I can't remember what page is this. It's page 25 out of 78 into the agenda supplement, and it is headed Scrutiny Recommendation on Local Centres, and it's got a small map associated with it. This is a map that illustrates the point that I made verbally at Cabinet. So it's just to confirm that that scrutiny recommendation will be taken into account, and the Chair of the Scrutiny, I hope, follows that. I think you were there when I said it, but this is just to show that it's a change from the drafted policy. We just couldn't incorporate it into the text that was included in the papers for full council, and I should have mentioned it, and apologies to officers and to the Chair of Scrutiny.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that extra addition. Right, so is this a point of order, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, point of order. We're getting closer and closer to the IOA amendment, and I've still not seen it. Can the officers please hand it around?
This is just where I was coming to, actually.
Thank you.
So there is a matter which, due to the late submission of that amendment, needs some consideration by the monitoring officer. Okay, so we need to have a break. We were going to need to have a break for about 15 minutes for that. Anyway, I suggest that since it is just about 7, we actually take a half-an-hour break now so everyone can get some food and a drink, and we will come back in half an hour. Okay, we'll see you at 7:30. Would you like, well, tell you what, at 7:30, so that's 35 minutes, okay? All right, see you all at 7:30. Right. So with all of the other amendments, we've had the officer's advice has been sort of published, the planning officer's advice has been published with them before you were asked to consider them and vote on them. So with this very late arriving one from the IOA, we do need to do the same thing. So we are going to start by hearing the advice from officers on this amendment. Okay. I will speak. Okay, are we all happy?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. Okay. Officer's advice is, all sites proposed for allocation have been assessed against the overall strategy of the plan. Those sites where development fits within this strategy have been proposed for allocation. This is particularly important where we have a housing crisis, substantial unmet housing need, and are reliant on neighbouring authorities to help us meet this. I'd just like to stress that this advice would be the same no matter which site was being proposed for removal at this stage. Whilst removal of an individual site is unlikely to render the plan unsound in of itself, its removal would not be consistent with the strategy of the plan, nor its approach to all other sites. We need to be able to demonstrate that we have assessed and found all available capacity within the city, and this amendment would be contrary to that. Officer recommendation is that this amendment would treat one specific site as an exception to the overall process used, and that this inconsistency could undermine the plan.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then I believe that that does give rise, as well, this particular site, to some declarations of interest needing to be made. So I'll start with Councillor Brown.
Out of force of habit, I was pressing the wrong microphone, so apologies, Lord Mayor, I hope you can hear me. Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor. I am a member of the Council's shareholder and joint venture group for OCHL, who are the owners of this land in question in this amendment. Under the Code of Conduct, this is therefore an other registrable interest, and there is a test as to whether I can vote. I do not consider I have a conflict of interest in this matter when the test is applied, as the tests relate to my well-being and whether I would consider my well-being to a greater extent than the city or ward inhabitants, i.e. I will not benefit from this. And approaching this, I am confident that I can take the wider public interests and that this would be obvious to a reasonable member of the public in possession of the facts when it is considered that the desire is to submit as sound a draft plan for examination as possible. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm also a member of the Council's shareholder and joint venture group for OCHL, who are the owners of the land. Under the Code of Conduct, this falls to be an other registrable interest, and there is a test as to whether I can vote. I also do not consider that I have a conflict of interest when this test is applied, as the amendment does not affect my well-being to a greater extent than an average resident of this city. Or an average councillor. And approaching this, I am sitting as a councillor, not as a shareholder, and I am confident that I am taking the wider public interest and that this would be obvious to a reasonable member of the public in possession of all the facts.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Yeah, a couple of things. So, like the others, I'm on the Council's shareholder and joint venture group for OCHL. That is an other registrable interest, and there's a test where I can vote. It clearly doesn't affect my well-being to a greater extent than other city or ward inhabitants. And in respect to my membership of the shareholder group, I'm confident I'm taking my view in, just considering wider public interests, and that it would be obvious to a reasonable member of the public in possession of the facts when considered that that's related to the plan as a whole. I should also add that over the years, I've corresponded with quite a few people and talked with quite a few people about this issue. And of course, you always reflect on that, and as time goes on, sometimes views evolve, views change, and so I shall continue to reflect in the course of this debate and approach it with the open-mindedness that you would expect.
Thank you. Councillor Mungongwe.
Thank you, your Lord Mayor. I'm also a member of the Council shareholder and joint venture group for OCHL, who are the owners of the land. Under the Code of Conduct, this falls to be on the other registrable interest, and there is a test as to whether I can vote. I do not consider I have a conflict of interest when the test is applied. This amendment does not affect my well-being to a greater extent that the city or ward inhabitants won't benefit from it. I'm approaching this, I'm confident that I'm taking the wider public interest, and this would be obvious to a reasonable member of the public in position to the fact when it is considered that the desire is to submit a draft plan for examination as possible.
Councillor Chapman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As many people in the Chamber will know, I am a member of the Council's shareholder and joint venture group OCHL, who are the owners of the land. Under the Code of Conduct, this falls to be an other registrable interest, and there is a test as to whether I can vote. I do not consider I have a conflict of interest when the test is applied, as this amendment does not affect my well-being to a greater extent than than the city/ward inhabitants, as I won't benefit from it. Approaching this, I'm confident that I'm taking the wider public interest, and this would be obvious to a reasonable member of the public in possession of the facts when it is considered that the desire is to submit a draft plan for examination as is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? And I can say that I also do have, I was on the shareholder and joint venture group, the council, some years ago, but to the best of my recollection, I've never taken any decisions with respect to this site. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yes, I am not a shareholder and have not been a shareholder with this responsibility for some time. I was, of course, a shareholder when the current landowner acquired the site, though I discovered after they'd acquired it, so I had no part in the decision. I am coming to this debate purely as the cabinet member for planning. I both have an open mind to the decision, but I have entire indifference as to the ownership of this site and indeed every other site that is in this local plan. And that is something which we should all have. Should we be taking into account that we will vote to exclude a site or include a site on the basis of its ownership, we should not be taking part in this decision.
Right. Councillor Brown.
Yes. Has the officer advice been actually circulated to all members? Because I think it needs to be. Yeah. Sorry. No, that's.
Yes, could everyone confirm you've had...
So that's not everything that David read out. So I think it would be helpful if that could be circulated to all members if possible, because I think there's a great deal more advice there than is on this piece of paper, which was just an initial response.
Thank you. 1 second. Small prize for the first person who reports that it's arrived in their email inbox. To read it. I'm going to give you, we're just going to give you all sort of 2 minutes to read and digest that advice. Okay, are we ready to go on? Yep. Yep, okay, thumbs up all round. Thank you. Right, in that case, Councillor Henwood, would you like to introduce your amendment?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to say thank you for the Friends of Iffley Village for your presentations today. They're very welcome, and thank you everybody for the respect and to Councillor Hollingsworth's responses. I just refer to Councillor Hollingsworth's response, which I think was very interesting. He mentioned the word viable. Is the site viable? But clearly there's been a planning application in the past, and it was the Environment Agency that actually refused this application. They were against it. I can't see it happening in the future either. Is it viable? I don't think so. And what are the Friends of Iffley Village doing with this piece of land at the moment? They are managing that site, and they have plans with Greyfriars School, Rosehill Primary School, the Oxford Academy, and students at Blackbird Leeds in order to approach and those students with poor attendance to improve their attendance and their attainment by introducing outreach programs on this site to educate them about environmental aspects of this site. There's
Sorry,
a hand up.
Is that a point of order?
It's like, it's not a declaration of interest, but I should flag that I work at the Oxford Academy, but I have no idea about any of this. So, and I don't get to make the decisions. So,
yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. And I'm sure your students at the Oxford Academy like to see you every day. And I do too. And at the Oxford Academy, just as a point of interest, 33% of those students at the Academy have a SEN registration or a learning difficulty of some sort. And it's these students that Friends of Iffley Village targeting might not be the right word, but are reaching out to improve their attendance and their attainment by offering extracurricular activities on these fields. I return back to Councillor Hollingsworth's second point, and it's one in which he refers to the district councils and using this field as a ransom strip to encourage neighbouring districts to sign up for housing programs by offering this piece of land as a ransom. I think this is unethical and unreasonable. I think it's poor practice. We shouldn't be using land within Oxford that we don't plan to build on, but to use as a planning ransom in order to introduce or encourage our district neighbours to build. The officer's advice also alludes to this. If you read on, I think, the third line, the planning officer is reliant on neighbouring authorities to help us meet this need. Why does this piece of land encourage our neighbouring authorities to build? I don't think it's a reasonable use. I think it's unethical what we're doing with this piece of land. It puts a great deal of stress and pressure on local residents in Iffley and the neighbouring areas as well. It's better to work with our local schools and develop this site for educational purposes instead of for housing purposes. So originally this site had planning application for 30 plus homes. Now it's not mentioned at all how many properties should be on this site. So what is the housing need on this site? It's not mentioned. We no longer know how many sites, housing dwellings would be planned or marketed on this site whatsoever. Let's use the talent that we have in IFLI to promote this site for a better use, to improve the attainment of those people that are struggling with normal school life, reaching out to those SEND students and those people with learning difficulties so that we can improve their education and make... Thank you, Chair.
You had another 30 seconds.
Thank you. There are other sites in Oxford, so I am aware of, between Marston and North Oxford. The City Council owns land of some 50 acres that's not on the housing register yet. But that would be a more appropriate site to meet our housing need, rather than use this site as a ransom strip to our local district councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a councillor to second this amendment? Councillor Malik, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I reserve my right to speak later.
Okay. Now opening it up. So, Councillor Smoten.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I am minded to abstain on this item for now, on the grounds that whilst the alternative uses for this site, which have been described today, do sound very positive, and I thank those who have presented today, I do also very much value the plan's existing policy and its strong potential to deliver much-needed social housing. I would want to see much more detail and a fully fleshed-out alternative plan before I'd feel at all comfortable putting that social housing potentially at risk. I would also really urge that if a proposal is going to be brought to make a pretty significant change to a piece of land like this, I would really, really like the time to consider that. And this is something which has been dropped on us 2 hours and 45 minutes ago, most of which time during which I've been having the rest of this debate. I would really want the context, I would really want the detail, I'd really want the opportunity to fully research the background and so on before I was to arrive at a decision of that magnitude. I note that the plan is going to come back to Council at a later stage after the Regulation 19 consultation. So I would suggest that an appropriate way to proceed might be for detail of that to be fleshed out in that time, for a detailed submission to be made into the Reg 19 consultation, which would mean that we're then all armed with much more information about what are the potential ways to go forwards with this site and able to take a much more informed decision the next time this plan is at Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would say I agree with Councillor Smoten about the late arrival of this particular amendment, which I think is very unfortunate. And I note that Councillor Smoten submitted his amendments to planning officers to have a look at as early as the beginning of January, which was the timetable that planning officers requested. So I think it's particularly unfortunate that this has come in quite so late. But I think the important thing for me is that when, in regard to any site that is in the local plan, we should not have any consideration of who owns the particular site. And it is really astonishing to me that people should be trying to withdraw sites at this very late stage of the local plan, considering that this has the potential to really undermine our whole plan, and it certainly has the potential to undermine our conversations with neighbouring authorities, whom we are reliant upon, unfortunately, under current circumstances, to help us meet our very substantial unmet housing need. So I am concerned, to say the least, about this amendment, and I think that I hope that Council will think very, very carefully before supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
I'll try and be brief, but I think before I say something substantial, I just wanted to, I guess, acknowledge that I think all councillors who represent wards in the roughly in the vicinity of that particular site have had probably extensive correspondence, campaigning with people with a range of views on the site allocation itself, on applications that have gone in on that site, may have expressed views on those, I myself included. This is clearly a contentious site, so I understand why this amendment has been brought, and I think it is useful to be debating it. I would, however, agree with what Councillor Brown and Councillor Smoten have said, which is that all group leaders agreed to a timeline for amendments to this local plan, whereby all councillors would be able to get sight of amendments where there could be back and forth with officers, where we could work on a cross-party basis to address those amendments, work to seek common ground. And I find it, frankly, deeply disappointing that that offer and that process wasn't taken up by one group, and instead we've got a pretty substantial amendment, not a minor textual amendment, not tidying up, but a pretty substantial amendment to the local plan, which it may be that groups would be minded to support, but being, as Councillor Smoten said, presented with it 2 hours and 45 minutes ago before being asked to vote on it, I don't think is appropriate. So I think I'm likely to abstain on this on those grounds and those grounds alone, putting aside any other thoughts that I might have on the site, simply because I think it's not appropriate, given we've agreed a process and that was intended so that we can have structured and debate and conversation within our groups, in some instances with residents and indeed with other groups, to bring an amendment of this nature at this late stage.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lord Mayor. A couple of things. I suppose one on substance, one on process. Just reflecting on the substance of Councillor Henwood's suggestions, in particular around alternative uses. I mean, look, I understand the point and the desirability of people going outdoors. I've done my best to support extension of access to Rivermead, which is a lovely local nature reserve. Also Court Place, which is lovely, which has been opened up by the university. That's really, really nice. Then there's obviously Oriel Meadow, which is adjacent, which is very nice. Aston's Eye a little bit further along, the Meadow Lane Tiny Forest and so on. Had a nice time down there. So you know, the access to the space is important. There's no public access, as I understand it, to this site at the moment. But also, I just don't know, and you know, officers will tell me if I'm wrong, that saying we've got a nice alternative use for a site, but it's, you know, that's enough to take it out of the local plan. I honestly don't think it cuts it as a reason for taking a particular decision. What might well cut it at some point is if there are sound technical objections. And I think the fact, as we all know in this chamber, there's a long-standing planning application and it's not been dealt with, suggests that this is not an easy site to bring forward. So when will that be resolved? Well, of course, if there was a planning application determined, it would be decided then. And I think that's when people would really get inside the detail of the site and whether the constraints on development could come, whether it would be in line, you know, all the sustainability appraisals and all the rest of it would hold water. So presumably that's when that would be judged. The other thing is, I suspect that the inspector this time, because I'm sure there will be objections to this site, will have to test those arguments. And it seems to me that those are, you know, not like Councillor Hemmond's points, those are going to be quite technical ones. I've seen, you know, some very well-made points about the ecology and so on, but we're not able to discuss that tonight. We don't have the evidence to discuss it, and frankly those are the things where I think, you know, planning inspectors are paid to do a job. So based on what I've heard tonight, I don't think there's a case for taking it out. I think there will be compelling points made down the track in front of the planning inspector, but that's where those are properly made rather than in this chamber, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else want to contribute before we do Councillor Malik, Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Henwood to finish up? Yep. Right, two more. Thank you. Councillor Alton.
Just, Lord Mayor, I wanted to clarify from the person who moved this amendment to mention the sites between Headington and North. As far as I know, there is not much of area left inside the ring road. And when the cabinet member responding, I would like to know, because that was the point made. And as far as I know, the Ruskin Field is in this, which my colleague will speak on later on. But what site he's talking about. And in a way, he's criticizing, I think, to Labour Lib Dem, that we have the councillors on that area and we are sparing some sites and not having that. So I want a clarity on that. Where are those sites which he's talking about?
Thank you. Councillor Muddiman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am mindful that officers have said that the removal of this individual site is unlikely to render this plan unsound, and I'm taking that very much into account. I also note that this site is the one in the local plan with the highest number of constraints on the site. It has 15. So obviously this is a very, very difficult and problematic site for development. And because it now has an allocation of a minimum allocation of 0 units, I feel that that puts it into more of one of the windfall sites, which may at some point have a handful of homes on it rather than a large development site. So this is obviously a very difficult decision. I also reiterate comments made about the process. I would have liked to have had much, much longer to consider this. But on the other side, I know that the local community group want to put in a heritage lottery bid, and they have great plans to have an enclosed site for outdoor education, which would be a unique opportunity for well-being, nature connection and employment skills for young people, particularly from those young people where there are high levels of deprivation in the area. So on balance, and I do see the arguments on both, but on balance, I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think we should follow the officer's advice on this. I think it's really, really clear. And I think we should not confuse perfectly sensible tactics about working with neighbouring authorities to meet our housing need with unacceptable standards of behaviour. I have just Googled unethical, which is the phrase and a word you used, Councillor Henwood, in your contribution. And that relates to violating moral principles and professional standards of conduct. I think that's a very strong term to use in relation to the way the council is going about this particular matter and the debate about the local plan tonight. And I would urge you to reconsider such language, please, because I don't think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Right. Oh, Councillor Miles.
Yeah, I just want to say how torn I feel on this, because at a time when we need to promote biodiversity and protect ancient meadows, suggesting such a site that also partially does flood is perhaps not the best use for this site. I hear also these arguments about it being a place to meet unmet housing need. Well, I strongly view, you've got to build things in the right place, and this might not be the right place to build things. You can build higher elsewhere, and there are lots of car parks and other sites that could potentially be meeting unmet housing needs within the boundaries of our city. However, regretfully, I feel that I do have to follow officers' advice on this, and so I will be abstaining, but I do so with a feeling of regret.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I shall be brief. I just wanted to join the sentiment that I appreciate why this has been brought. I appreciate the work that the residents group have been doing. I appreciate it's a very contentious site, but as Councillor Miles has just outlined and as others have outlined, I am concerned about the timeline that's gone on here, and given the very, very limited time, I feel compelled to follow the officer recommendation, and so will also be abstaining.
Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've discussed this site many times, so I think it's a bit disingenuous for people to say that it's come out so late. I've been here for about 4 or 5 years, and I've come across this site many times. We've had people speaking on it. So you just make a stance on what you know. I just find it difficult. People can't commit to something and use that as an excuse not to say what they believe or with trying to escape some type of responsibility, because this site has been round the block a number of times. It's popular with one set of people and unpopular with others. I think that we should look at the local plan and sometimes just take some responsibility and not worry about politics all the time.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ottino.
Yeah, I think we've got to. We have a responsibility to sort of manage the housing need in Oxford, and we've got to be realistic about this. There are many sites in this plan in many of our wards where there will be challenges which will be unpopular with local residents. They'll be missing out on something, and we could take them all out. There could be valid reasons for taking them all out. But we have to meet this housing demand, and we need to think about homelessness and people having to safer serve, and people trapped in that private rented sector. These are difficult decisions we have to make, but we shouldn't be taking this out of the plan, and we should trust in the planning process that will protect any of these sites when they come forward, that will protect any of the issues raised like ecology or view or whatever. It's difficult decisions we're having to make, and we'll possibly be unpopular with local groups, but we have a responsibility to do as much as we can to sort out this housing crisis.
Thank you. I think we are now going to go to Councillor Malik for seconding.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Number of things. I mean, amendment is late, yes, but the Constitution allows it. So we all bound to our Constitution. That's one thing. Secondly, like Councillor Raymond said, this been questioned before here, etc. But about few minutes ago, in a different position where I was obviously not on the ball on the play area, etc., we're talking about protecting the green sites and biodiversity and etc. I mean, this is an ancient meadow. It's not a rocket science. I respect what the other two groups are saying here. They're going to abstain. That's fine. But I totally disagree. Because when Councillor Henwood was talking about Marston and Headington, whatever, it's nothing to do with the Ruskin field, and he wasn't talking about the Lib Dem. It's basically the administration who choose to, because previous leader Bob Price and Colin Cookman was in charge of the planning. So we pass the other side of Marston Village. So this land belongs between this side, north of Marston, all the way to Wilberco, and I believe is around between 40 to 60 acre land owned by 3 different landlords. 2 are the private landlords and 1 actually owned by the city council. So I am not sure if city council owns a 20-odd acre land, etc. And when this previously our local plan got rejected, and I went and asked the officers, and I have a great respect for the officers, but equally political steer is also very important in the council matters. So we got to be very naive to understand it's just wholly because the officers, yes, I will respect the officer advice, but I will not agree with it, because I would like to question when we are asking, and I agree with the administration side, we need to ask the neighboring side to have a housing need, and we're demonstrating that. Not in the meadow, because during the COVID, we wasted £150,000 of the taxpayer money to create an artificial meadow in a Broad Street. And you could not make up. And now is the administration want to build up an actually meadow, right? It's just a joke, in my point of view. Secondly, the thing is, why this council did not, where previously administration under Bob Price and Colin Cook did put housing in that site, and then this time they are basically resisting. What is the reason? That was a very much could be going on, because you already allowed 150, 200 houses already on that land, and you could have asked the county council if they give you the access on the A40, you could have gone through. So housing can be met there. And I think for you guys, obviously, if you don't have the information for the future, you want to question these things. We're sitting on our own 20-acre plus land and another 2 private landlords. Why are we not accessing that side, which is already is going through building now? So these are the things. I mean, I can understand if you basically do it, but this was the time. If you believe in your green ethics, if you believe in a biodiversity and protecting the green open spaces, you should be opposing this time now. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we're going to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you very much. I will start by just briefly reiterating the importance of the process that we are going through, particularly because we are unable to meet our housing need. And I emphasise that is a really crucial point here. I'll put it in layman's terms. If Oxford City Council said we need 21,000 odd homes, we'll find some of them, but there's lots of other bits we find a bit too difficult, so we don't want to do it. It's now your problem. And we say that to South Oxfordshire, we say it to West Oxfordshire, we say it to Charwell, we say it to Vale of Whitehorse. Not unreasonably, they will be unhappy, and more to the point, it undermines our ability to defend our local plan and keep some degree of control over it when it goes through the inspection, the public hearing. So we may not get the local plan that we were looking for. And the importance of that, it's a difficult relationship to have. And that is why, and I touched on this before, why I think we need to be absolutely clear. We cannot randomly take units of site allocation out because we don't like it. Couple of pointers coming up from some of the issues that have been raised. Just to emphasise, obviously you're all aware, this is not a planning application on this site. This is just a site allocation. The fact that a site is allocated does not determine the planning application. A planning application on that site could come forward. It could be for something that's somewhat different to what is in the site allocation policy, and the planning committee or decision maker, whether it's a planning inspector, whoever it is, could decide to approve that because there are material considerations which are beneficial. Equally, it could be that a planning committee, an inspector, could determine that a planning application on the site, even if it is allocated, should be refused because there are clear material considerations for refusal. Those options are entirely within the control of the planning decision makers. It's not related to the site allocation. Bit of clarity on this. This is not a ransom strip to try and get South Oxfordshire to give us more land. This is us demonstrating that we are serious in looking at sites across the entire city, and every single one where the landowner is willing and there are not reasons for excluding it is included in this local plan. There are not very many, which is why we are very short. I have been trying to work out, since it's been mentioned, this site, so I'm trying to answer Councillor Altaf Khan's question, which is a very good question. Where is this City Council-owned site in Headington and or North Oxford that is being left out, and is of varying sizes, depending on who you're listening to? Every single site that the City Council owns, and indeed any other landowner who was willing to have it put forward, was looked at. And if there were no grounds for its exclusion, it was included. Grounds for exclusion would include, for example, is it on the floodplain? Yes, in which case it might be excluded because it's not possible to develop on it. The only thing I can think of is there are some sites which are in a range of ownership which are not far away from Marston, where the landowner is keen for them to be put forward, but the county council, the Highways Authority, says that it is not possible to manage the transport, and therefore there are fundamental reasons for its refusal. That is the only thing I can think of. So I will sum up and saying, one final point. There isn't some kind of scale of sites. They either are sufficient to include or they are not sufficient to include. It's a binary decision. And this one, yes, if you wanted to look at, there are a number of issues which are concerns about it, but those are all reflected on that and taken into account in deciding it should be allocated. So I would say, please vote against this because I think it creates a serious problem.
Thank you. Right, so we then finally go to Councillor Henwood to sum up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First, Councillor Smoten, thank you very much for your comments. I do note that we do need to come up with an alternative plan, and that needs to be well documented. And I'm sure the Friends of Italy Village will take that into consideration and start writing to councillors explaining what their plans will be for the future. Councillor Brown, I acknowledge the timetable coming late to the meeting, but I would remind you that other amendments and amendments to amendments also came late today as well. Councillor Jarvis, I think you're right. I think there needs to be extensive conversations on the use of this land, and I welcome those comments. I'm sure Friends of Iffley Village again will come up and communicate with everybody. We're all familiar with this site. It's been going on for 5 years, so I don't think any of us are not aware of this site. I think Councillor Hollingsworth, you've responded for Councillor Eltarth on my behalf. Thank you for that. Councillor Muddyman, thank you very much for reminding everybody there are 15 constraints on this piece of land. It will be very difficult to get planning permission for, and currently, yes, you're right, 0 units are cited on the plan. Councillor Chapman, yes, you're right, I apologise if my language has been offensive. If I've broken the code of conduct, I do apologise. Councillor Miles, best use of the site, again, thank you for that comment. We will be taking that back and looking at it. Councillor Eggman, I can't read my own handwriting, sorry. I concur with you that we are all familiar with the site. I don't think there is any reason not to. What I haven't done in recent weeks is publish what the group are intending to do with the site. I don't think that's for me to do, but I'm sure the group will take your ideas back and write to councillors as well. Councillor Malik, thank you very much for your comments. Councillor Hollingsworth, I still think we're bartering with a piece of land. That's not the right way to conduct planning applications. Should this application come to a committee, do we sit there and consider, oh, if I don't vote this in, then we don't get this application in South Oxfordshire? I mean, that pressure on the committee, I don't think it's just, and I don't think it should be a reason to hold it onto the list rather than take it off. Again, thank you, Chair. I leave it over to you.
Thank you. There were... We could correct some of the misunderstanding, I think, in your last statement, but probably we don't have time now. So I think we will just move immediately now, please, to a vote on whether to accept this amendment. Can I see all of those in favour of this amendment, please? Thank you. All of those against? Okay. And any abstentions? Okay. So the amendment falls. Yeah. Right, so this is a point where if there are any other individual amendments, they could come forward now. I'm just wondering whether anybody has any. We've got Hosnia's question. Okay.
I don't think it will produce a rushed amendment. On page 391 about Sandy Lane Recreation Ground, this site, as you know, is the site of much interest locally. So having read through that, on section F, it says the type and the layout could be split into smaller spaces throughout the site that provide different functions for residents and visitors, or provided through one larger area of open space. I mean, that clearly would preclude it being used with the football pitch in mind. So I was wondering why that particular section is in there, and whether if you could provide any explanations, and if not, then I would possibly consider moving an amendment to remove it, but I just wanted to have an explanation as to why, and apologies for the lateness of this query. It's been a very busy time. Thank you.
So I think you need to answer that, Councillor Hollingsworth, in case Councillor
I was trying to track down page 390. That was taking me a little while.
391, yeah.
Yeah, so it's over on 391 that follows. So I think This is setting out a policy for I mean, it's essentially repeating what's in the current local plan in terms of its allocation. So it is, as with any site allocation, I appreciate we just had quite a lengthy debate on a site allocation policy, but a site allocation policy sets out things which need to be taken into account when a decision maker, whether that's the planning committee, planning inspector, whatever it might be, or planning officer, will need to take into account alongside material consideration. So it is a range of these. The planning system does not work in the sense of every single box has to be ticked, which is just the way the English planning system is set up, much to the slightly upset response of one or two of my students who are international students and are baffled by how the English system works. So I don't see there is a necessity to change this. I would suggest that if you have a specific and particular concern about a particular form of wording, pick that up with council officers. As with any of the wording on anything in this, we have to say once it goes through the Regulation 19 and then goes to the planning inspector's hearing, it is possible if there's an objection, the planning inspector goes, wait a minute, this sentence needs some adjustment or this change. It can be helpful for council officers who will obviously be representing us there to be able to take into account an expression on this and say, no, you're right, with the planning inspector and steer it in a particular direction. But I think rather than try and amend it, that would be now, that I think would be the best way of addressing it. I'm not seeing planning officers shaking their heads with vigour, so I am hoping that that was the correct answer.
Is that...
The particular issue is that there's a very well-used football pitch on there, which does not look like it can be accommodated nearby elsewhere, though I have been looking and speaking to university colleges that own land, etc., etc. So I do wonder whether some provision, because it is causing a lot of concern to the users, and I do realise this is very late in the day, so apologies.
If we could...
It is a requirement for any planning application on that site to be able to replace the pitches. So they will need to do that. So they will need to identify a site. For example, I believe Littlemore Parish Council, I'm gazing at Littlemore councillors, has identified a potential site which is very close by, and I am aware in previous discussions that other sites in Blackbird Leys have been identified as replacing those.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Perhaps our Head of Planning would like to clarify as well.
Precisely as Councillor Hollingsworth says, the pitches will need to be re-provided, but point F is about the public open space that's generated, the requirements generated by that development on top of that. So within the development, public open space is described, but pitches that are currently there will need to be replaced.
Thank you. I'm hoping with that clarification you'll be...
Yes, I'm happy to leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Great. Now, before we go to the full, the debate on the full local plan, we have a couple of public speakers who've been waiting since 7 o'clock. Would you be happy if we get them in to give their speeches before we go on, continue with the debate? Yes, thank you very much indeed. Okay. In that case, we will invite them in.
Lord Mayor.
Yes.
Just acutely aware that this meeting is due to end at 9 p.m. and so we may need to suspend standing orders before the public speakers arrive if we're to get through the substantial items of business that are before motions.
Good point, because as there are 4, as monitoring officer pointed out, with responses, that might take us half an hour. Thank you very much. Okay, so...
Could I propose that we suspend standing orders until we conclude item 20 on the agenda, given that's the substantive business we need to get through?
So that would mean not doing the motions. That would mean... Okay, monitoring officer is going to weigh in.
I'm happy to second that.
So sorry, is this working? I can't, yeah. So there are the 3 options. 1, you can extend the meeting until the business is finished. 2, you can adjourn the meeting to another day to be agreed or that's set tonight. Or 3, you can defer business to the next meeting of council. So you'd have to vote to defer each item. They're the 3 options to deal with the fact that we still have quite a substantial amendment agenda before us, and we've not yet concluded the local plan. I think that's something that if we are about to have the public speakers come and speak, and they may want to speak ahead of the items that they're speaking of, if they are deferred or adjourned, they may want to reserve the right to speak there. We have a 6-month rule, so it's problematic. So it is something that we actually, therefore, if your mind is to do anything other than extend the business until you've concluded, we need to take a view on that now.
Okay, that's tricky, because if we just say till business is concluded, we will be here potentially till after 10 o'clock.
It would be until every item on the agenda is dealt with, yes.
Okay. So that is possible. Or we can pick out some of these items that could be delayed to the future meeting and say we will finish at 10 o'clock, but get through as much as...
An option is that council resolves to defer items to the following meeting. Alternatively, you can adjourn this meeting. I've got 3 potential dates where we could hold the meeting over to if you're not deferring it to the next. So just to be clear, we have a meeting in March, which would where you defer business to. Alternatively, the next 3 meeting dates without any meetings on are Thursday the 29th of January, Wednesday the 4th of February, and Tuesday the 10th of February. So there would be days that be looking at to reopen this meeting.
Take a couple of views then. Councillor Brown, Councillor Morris.
Sorry.
Leader of the council, if you could just weigh in.
Councillor Jarvis moved a recommendation, which I seconded. So I think we actually do have a sort of recommendation that we try and continue the business up to item 20, which is questions on notice, up to and including, I think, questions on notice. Effectively, that means deferring the public addresses. Sorry, not the public addresses. I mean, I think we could take the public addresses because we've just agreed to vary that. It does mean the scrutiny update report isn't included, so we might just want to note that quickly. I think the critical thing is whether or not we're going to discuss motions tonight. And I think that the sensible thing would be to defer the motions in the order that they came to the March meeting and to agree that today. And then we would need to say that to the speakers who are coming to address us on those particular issues, because they might want to go home now and come back and address us in March instead. So that's my proposal. I think it fits with what Councillor Jarvis was saying, and I'd like us to move to a vote on that.
I'm hoping you're going to give a representative view of your group-ish.
Thank you, Lord. I had a quick clarificatory question, if that would be okay, was if we deferred the motions, would that prohibit groups from making...
Can we all be quiet, please?
If we were to defer the motions to the next meeting, would that stop groups from bringing new motions to that meeting, would be my question. If it would not, I'm very, very happy with the approach just suggested, but it would be useful to have confirmation on that from the monitoring officer.
It would not prevent groups bringing motions, but obviously the 2 motions that are on the agenda would rank first, and with the greatest of respect, we rarely get through 1 motion, let alone 2, so it would be, to a certain point, not certain that they wouldn't be addressed at that meeting.
Is that point of order?
Yes, yeah. Councillor Raymond.
Does that, whatever Chris Jarvis put forward, is that fitted with the constitution of deferring motions to the next one and rewriting the whole order just because we can't get it in today?
Point of order.
I would rather get through them this...
Lord Mayor, I was going to raise this point of order before when you came after the break. I think for tonight's meeting, it was not very well briefed at the start, and looking at the agenda and itemize how much time it takes is the duty of Lord Mayor and the Democratic Services helping you. That was not...
That's not a point of order.
No, that's the process. That's the process you did not follow tonight. And you should have told us that we should bring blankets and the food here if we were going to sleep on this here.
Khan, could you please be quiet? We'll just have a think.
Councillor Jarvis, can I just check? So are you proposing that we take everything up to questions on notice, including them, and then everything else would be deferred until the next meeting?
That would be, yes, up to and including. I'll defer to Councillor Powell as to whether he's dreaming to present the Scrutiny Committee report this evening or whether we can move that next time as well. But that would be my proposal, yes.
21, 22.
Okay, so we do have a proposal that has been seconded. So if that is constitutional, that suggestion.
Can we just clarify then, Councillor Jarvis, that just so we're really clear and we can minute a deferral, what you're proposing is that council is extended to deal with business up to and including item 21, with every item thereafter being deferred to the meeting of what's the date in March? To the March meeting, 23rd of March.
Including the public addresses, some of which we will receive now and some of which we may push back to next time. Is what we exactly, yeah. That's exactly right, yeah.
So in all public addresses, because there are public speakers who aren't connected to an item, I believe. There's 3 who aren't, so they may want to speak, but are we saying that you want to defer that? I mean, that's up to council, the decision, but I just need to be clear what it is that council is resolving to defer and what it is that you're not resolving to defer.
Can I try and help? I think we're saying, Chris and myself, that we would be happy to take public addresses from those that still want to talk to us, and I think the Lord Mayor had already proposed taking those next. So it's really only the Scrutiny Committee update report and motions on notice that we're deferring. That is the proposal, is my understanding.
And the outside bodies as well, I believe, Councillor Brown.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Point of order, Lord Mayor.
Is this a point of order?
Yes. We haven't had a clarification if it follows the Constitution. First, please.
I think the Monitoring Office, is it constitutional to do this kind of deferral?
On the motions, specifically.
It's up to council or any meeting of the council, any committee, to decide whether or not it wishes to defer. That is a motion that can be moved not on notice, as set out in the Constitution, so it's perfectly constitutional.
Right, thank you. And then Councillor Mudderman, if this is quick.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, if we vote to not to go into the motions tonight, one of the motions, obviously, the amendment on it, I'm sure people are aware, is extremely time sensitive. So I would like to ask when would be the right time to request an emergency motion that the signing of the contract with the new, with Jackson's be held off until the motion on the bridge is heard. So it would be, when can I submit an emergency
so that is something
motion?
people can take into account when they are voting whether to defer these motions or not.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
I want to put in an emergency motion. I have the right to do that, do I not?
No, so the rules regarding publication of items in advance and motions on notice, you've got to submit a motion on notice in line with the Constitution, which you have done. If council votes to defer it today, then it is deferred. You can't submit an emergency one.
Right, thank you. So we are now going to vote on the proposal to defer from, essentially from 22 onwards. And no, we said we'd keep in 21.
What is 21?
That's all of the public speakers. We're going to have those. Anyone who wants to speak will come and speak now. Okay, please can I see all those in favour of that deferral? And extending the meeting until we have finished item 20. Because the 21 is going to come at the start. Okay, thank you. That's carried. All right, then let's have the public speakers in as soon as possible. Right, everyone, can we have some quiet, please? We have got Siobhan Allen. Thank you so much for waiting, and I'm sorry we've kept you waiting.
No, it's okay. Lord Mayor, councillors, thank you for hearing me today. I'm a politics student at the Swan School, and for many centuries, Oxford has been known for its growth and innovation in many areas like education. But we lack a modern county-wide youth voice system. This is why I am proposing a youth council and young mayor programme for young people across the county to get politically involved. By launching a youth council and a democratically elected mayor, this would enrich Oxford's democracy as a whole. It would allow passionate individuals like myself to become politically involved by representing the youth of Oxford in their own form of council, whilst also collaborating with both Oxford City and County Council. This would break down socio-economic imbalances within Oxford by bringing together youth from different backgrounds. Oxford would be following modern councils like Bristol and Lewisham, which already have and involve youth by forming their own youth council. By forming a youth council, Oxford would reflect its diverse and forward-thinking capabilities. Thank you for hearing me today.
Well, unanimous applause. Well done. I think the Leader of the Council is going to respond.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming, and I'm so sorry that you've had to wait for so long. It doesn't normally take quite that long for us to come to public speakers. We have had a very busy meeting this evening. I'm really welcome your proposals, but I think we probably need to have some further discussions about how we can sort of take them forward, because you may not be aware, but we're in the process of local government reorganisation at the moment, which means that until July, we don't really know what the future for this council will be. It won't be this council as such. We do know that much, but there are 3 different proposals on the table. So I think what we would very much like to do, well, speaking personally, is to put some ideas forward for the new council, whatever that might look like, which could include some serious youth representatives as part of that structure going forward. But realistically, it's going to be proposals for the new council rather than proposals for our existing council that I think we will need to focus on. So really welcome the start of a conversation. I'm really happy to meet with you and to talk about it further so that we can put forward sensible proposals as part of our working, which we'll be doing over the next 2 years, to put together the proposals for the new council. So thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we have Caddy Beck. Hello, Caddy.
Okay, I coordinate the campaign to save Bertie Park Recreation Ground in South Oxford. We've spoken many times about the loss of open space which this development would involve. This time we'd like to talk about the planning process itself and highlight objections raised by Thames Valley Police. You have told us many times you want to build on Bertie Park because it's been on local plans for 20 years. So we thought it was okay to cut and paste a policy from one plan to another. When your principal planner said, for reassurance, a site wouldn't automatically be carried over from one local plan to the next, but would be subject to a new review of the current planning position and any constraints or opportunities. This was a light bulb moment. The plan policy states planning permission will only be granted if the existing Bertie Place recreation ground, including a replacement multi-use games area, is re-provided on land in Plot B behind Whiteham Street. The current plan was submitted in March 2019, but by that November it was already clear you had no intention of re-providing the recreation ground as required. You announced instead a smaller but more modern play area which would be open to the public. the land behind Whiteham Street was to become a nicer environment for the community, i.e. you decided to depart from the plan policy before the current plan was even agreed. The NPPF requires that plan policies be both up-to-date and deliverable. It is obvious that the submitted plan policy for Bertie Park was neither. Your planning application was validated in May 23. It normally takes 13 weeks for proposals to each planning committee. The first date that we were given was that August. For 2.5 years, you have drilled holes and held meetings. This is just such a waste of public money. We have known for a long time that Thames Valley Police thought that the land behind Whiteham Street was unsuitable for unaccompanied children. They have now officially submitted their advice. They say Site B does not have any clear function or purpose and significantly lacks surveillance, creating significant concern that there will be opportunities for crime and antisocial behaviour to flourish in this area. This space is very difficult to activate and is highly likely to be a significant attractor for crime and antisocial behaviour. Careful consideration needs to be evidenced how legitimate activities will be promoted in this space and crime or antisocial behaviour prevented or discouraged. This has not been achieved in the current application. The police also say the mugger is located very close to residential properties, creating a risk of noise, having a negative impact on residents, neighbour disturbances and community tension. This space is a very challenging location for development with no clear solution. I appreciate the community wish to retain this youth recreation facility. However, if houses are to be built here, then neither the current location nor the previously suggested location in Site B are appropriate locations for such a facility. The council has not listened to the voices of local residents. We hope that it will listen to the police. Finally, in October last year, OCC published its Green Spaces Technical Advice Note number 9. This says, if you want to argue that an open space like Bertie Park is surplus, you would need to demonstrate a long-term lack of public access and/or use. You have not done this. It says that in Oxford, there is no spare pitch capacity, and that with the population of Oxford growing, if pitches like our multi-use games area are lost without compensation, then so is that opportunity. Our recreation ground sits at the heart of our community because it is a physical space where families meet and kids get together. If you build on it, it is gone forever, and so is the heart of our community.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Hollingsworth has a response for you.
Yes, I think you've heard much from me. I will just remind every single person in the room, councillors, this is a live planning application. If you wish to sit on the planning committee in resolving it, you need to retain an open mind.
Thank you very much. That's it. Okay, so our third speaker this evening is Chuck Artwell.
Does Oxford City Council believe it is right, just and correct for illegal migrants and asylum seekers are prioritised for housing and welfare needs by the Home Office and by the Council above native English men and women's housing needs?
Thank you. I believe Councillor Linda Smith is going to reply.
Thank you. It's not the case that illegal migrants and asylum seekers are prioritised for housing. Persons from abroad who are claiming asylum are not eligible for inclusion on housing registers when, by virtue of their immigration status, they are ineligible for an allocation of housing. Only housing applicants who are eligible and have a qualifying local connection to Oxford, with a few exceptions, such as domestic abuse survivors or armed forces veterans, will normally qualify for inclusion on our housing register and a possible offer of housing. It's the Home Office that has responsibility for providing accommodation for asylum seekers while their claims are assessed. The previous government stopped processing asylum claims and allowed the number of asylum seekers left in limbo to rise, and which necessitated the use of asylum hotels. The current Labour government has committed to speed up decisions and end the use of hotels. As an accredited local authority of sanctuary, the Council has a proud history of supporting households who have settled in Oxford from abroad, including those who have arrived via government-backed resettlement schemes and visa schemes, with the Council predominantly providing support into private rented accommodation for these groups.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Okay, and our final speaker is Dan Glazebrook. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion, which you'll hear now in March, I think, put forward by Councillors Jupp and Miles, rightly points out what the Friends of Grampont Nature Park have been saying for some time, that the Oxpens Bridge would not provide the flood-proof route required for student housing at Oseney Mead, rendering it a pointless replication of the existing two bridges in the same area. And the incredible 14 million price tag for the bridge would be far better spent elsewhere. For example, it's surely only a matter of time before there's a serious casualty on the A40 at Barton Park, where there have already been several nasty accidents already, as residents are forced to dodge speeding traffic every time they want to reach shops, schools, or the doctor's surgery. The council's building of the estate without a bridge or subway was directly counter to both the police's recommendations and county-wide traffic regulations. Likewise, the lack of a crossing from south to east Oxford at Jackdaw Lane means residents of New Hinksey are forced to, instead on a long diversion round the Plain, the most dangerous cycling spot in Oxford, where there have already been fatalities. It would even be useful to have a bridge across the river directly from Oseney Mead to ensure users do not have to cross the flooded towpath under the railway bridge, where a man tragically drowned just last winter. The one place a bridge is not needed is from Grampont Nature Park to Oxpens Meadow, two sites already linked by an excellent, wide and well-used cycle and foot bridge just 100 metres from the proposed new one. Yet it seems the Labour Council preferred to use public money to pointlessly augment the private commercial developments of Oxford University than to address the safety and well-being of their own constituents. When the residents of Grampont and Oseney started their campaign in 2024, they were told by a Labour cabinet member that it would not be possible to use growth deal funding for projects such as those being put forward today or in March. They were told, quote, that we couldn't spend it elsewhere in the city. It can only be spent on infrastructure that enables new development or new housing. And it's true, this is the usual criteria for projects receiving Oxfordshire Housing and Growth Deal funding. But Oxford City Council, unique amongst all the councils in Oxfordshire, have by then managed to wangle itself an exemption from these criteria. Unlike all the other councils, the City Council was and is allowed to use growth deal funding for projects that do not directly enable new development or new housing. So the funds could have and can be used for other projects. Furthermore, it's now clear that the Oxpens River Bridge, as currently conceived, does not itself enable any new housing or development, whether directly or indirectly. When the bridge went to planning, council officers were at pains to point out that, quote, the future developments at Oseney Mead and Oxpens could go ahead without the bridge, that the bridge is a standalone development that can be delivered on its own without the need for Oxpens or Oseney Mead allocations to be delivered, and vice versa. That the Oseney Mead development could still come forward without the bridge, and that if the bridge doesn't go ahead, then both the proposed developments, Oseney Mead and Oxpens, could come ahead on their own. There you have it in black and white. The bridge is not necessary either for the Oxpens development or for Oseney Mead. This is truer than ever since the Environment Agency vetoed the council's plans to floodproof the towpath between Oseney Mead and Grampont Nature Park in November 2021. The council to this day don't have the faintest idea how to floodproof this path, which means that to reach the new floodproof bridge from Oseney Mead, users will have to cross a section of towpath that itself regularly floods, and where, as I mentioned, someone tragically drowned just last year. Last time I stood here, the cabinet member responsible responded with a long list of outdated documents referring to plans for the bridge. All of these were made redundant by the EA's ruling in 2021. The council are now in breach of Home England's funding requirements, which, unlike the growth deal, the council have not wangled an exemption from, which state that funds can only be used for infrastructure that unlocks housing developments. The 1.5 million they were awarded by that body for the bridge was provided specifically for a path that their application claimed would provide the floodproof exit out of Oseley Mead required for residential planning permission to be granted on the site. In fact, it will do nothing of the sort. You may, in the coming discussion, seek to ask council leaders how they expect to get millions more from the body for a project that which it is not lawfully allowed to fund, as it will not, by their own admission, enable any housing. Now the council have diverted a further £3.7 million from the local budget for the bridge, including £1 million from the maintenance fund, which is supposed to be used to repair council homes. Enough is enough. It's time to stop throwing good money after bad and to start addressing the safety and well-beings of the town's working-class residents, rather than simply subsidising the wealthiest institution in the city with a pointless ornament for its commercial developments. You need to make sure the Cabinet do not sign the construction contract until you've had a chance to hear the motion and debate the issues. The first time you're going to have a chance to do that has now been suspended, and the Cabinet is on the verge of signing the contract,
Sorry,
which will commit them.
I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to stop because that's no longer on your written statements. Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, I believe you have a response.
Yes, I will try and be as brief as possible, but there's quite a lot to cover. Just a little reminder, the City Council is actually delivering this bridge as part of the growth funding for Oxfordshire County Council. Just helpful to point that out. So as the address said, and I use his quote, last time I stood here, the Cabinet member responsible, that's me, responded with a long list of outdated documents referring to plans for the bridge, all of which were made redundant by the EA ruling in 2021. And in effect, what this is doing is attempting to recreate a claim that was rejected by the judge in last year's failed attempt to overturn the planning permission granted for this bridge. That claim, the one that failed, was that the purpose of the bridge is solely to connect the Oxpens and Oseley Mead development sites. This was not the purpose when this bridge was first proposed 20 years ago, and it is still not the case. The documents in question may, and I looked at some of them earlier today, which was most interesting, may in some instances have existed for some time, but what they say remains entirely relevant, and the judge made that clear in his reference, for example, to the 2013 Oxpens SPD. So I thought it might be helpful to remind Council of some of those documents, what they say and when they said it, and indeed who proposed them and who supported them at the time. All were consulted on widely, at length, debated in full council, and then adopted as formal documents. So let's go to the first of them, the West End Area Action Plan, adopted by the City Council in June 2008. And to quote, it sought a new pedestrian and cycle bridge across the Thames to join Oxpens Field to the Thames towpath is proposed. This would link the West End to Oseley Mead and the West Oxford cycle route. Improvements will also be made to the route running east from the pedestrian bridge. Now, this document, with the detail of this bridge set out in the context and the wording of proposed policy WE2, was finalised by the Executive Board, which is what the Cabinet was then called, on the 14th of May 2007, after 4 years of public consultation and preparation. It was then approved, complete with this bridge, at a special full council meeting on the 21st of May 2007. The then leader of Oxford City Council, Councillor John Goddard, who sat more or less over there, was responsible for the policy. He proposed it, complete with this bridge. This council had the chance to oppose the bridge or attempt to delete that policy from the plans. The record of the meeting that I looked at earlier today showed that precisely no one did so from any political party. When the council submitted this plan after 4 years of preparation and consultation to the government for approval on the 17th of June 2007, the Oxford Mail, our predominant and excellent local paper, reported the enthusiasm for the plans, including this bridge, of Councillor Goddard. He reported that there was widespread backing within the city for the plans that had been submitted. Moving on to, it did land in Grant Bont, as I shall go on. We can have a little chat about this, or you could ignore me. It's entirely up to you. On November 2013, the Oxpens SPD was adopted by the City Council. This explains in detail as the judge noted, what is proposed and what the objectives are for the new bridge. To quote, "A new bridge crossing the Thames, or ISIS, should be provided to enhance opportunities to move between Oxpens and the wider area, notably the Grand Pont Nature Reserve." And so it is in, I think you'll find, and residential areas up and downstream on the opposite side of the river. Indicative locations for the proposed bridge crossing are illustrated on the Development Framework Plan and the Illustrative Master Plan. The maps that are the Development Framework Plan and the Illustrative Master Plan in that SPD include the proposed bridge in almost exactly the location for which planning permission was submitted and ultimately approved. The other bridges across the Thames will remain, and the potential to improve the Gasworks rail bridge, for example, was considered by Oxfordshire County Council in 2016-2017, and it was discounted as a workable option. Further review highlighted considerable challenges, particularly with the footpath along Castle Mill Stream, which is too narrow to accommodate cycling, and the alternative route over the Castle Mill Stream Bridge, which would have required alterations to create a hardened path and altered levels across what is now a protected meadow. This bridge, the one that has been proposed since, well, one could argue, going all the way back to 2005 when the public consultation began, will be delivered entirely by external funding. But this is funding which, if it is not used for this bridge, will have to be returned to the different funding bodies. The City Council is not allowed to allocate it to any other project. So funding from the Growth Deal for Oxfordshire was allocated to this scheme with the support both of Oxfordshire County Council, which is the responsible body, and Homes England, who provided the funding to the County Council. So, in summary, I would say, the proposed bridge provides the opportunity for a new and convenient route across the river, designed specifically for the location and to support the placemaking that will support the development of the West End as a vibrant quarter of the city and connect it to other parts of Oxford to the south and to the west of the city centre. These are the objectives now, and they were also the objectives of the bridge first proposed by this council and its then leader and his fellow councillors of many different parties 20 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks. Right, that's the public speakers done. Okay, so we are now going back to the local plan, and we now have, it's now time for the debate on the substantive debate on the amended local plan with all of those amendments that we voted on earlier. I'm hoping you haven't got a lot more to say about it, but let's see. Do I have any members wanting to speak on the amended local plan? Councillor Smoten? Councillor Fad. Off you go. Councillor Smoten.
We had the proposal. I thought it hadn't been proposed. In fact, it's been proposed roughly 2 hours ago. Yeah, okay, fine. Right, okay. Councillors, I will abstain on the main vote today, and that is because, A, I don't want to stop this from going out to Reg 19. I think it's better than the existing local plan. But B, I think there's two substantive issues that I would really urge cabinet members and officers to devote more thought and time to in the interim with a goal of substantive improvement. Firstly, and most importantly, I believe we are still lacking a practicable route to gentle densification in our most sustainable locations. By gentle densification, I mean building up from suburban densities, typically semi-detached houses and things of that size, to 3-4 story apartments or so, sort of core sort of densities. And by sustainable locations, I mean those that are in walking distance of public transport, amenities, and employment. Every home that's provided in that way by going upwards is one that we don't sprawl outwards into the countryside and is likely a car off the road in the long term. So I think it's a highly desirable goal if and when we can achieve it. I think we're halfway there. We have an admirable density policy that asks for 120 dwellings per hectare in such places. That usually means 3 to 4 story apartments. It's exactly what you'd hope for in such a core location, such a very walkable location. But if that site is currently lined with suburban development, then an application for 1 or 2 plots to break out of the existing roofline and rise in height to the new standard is highly likely to get knocked back as an obtrusive eyesore. That means that such applications are rare and succeed even more rarely. In practice, achieving a step change in density is only really achievable when there's common ownership, witness the Lees regen, where it's all council-owned, or on Greenfield, witness Redbridge Paddock. So, we have policy that endorses the end state when everybody has built up to a uniform 4 stories, but not the steps that are needed along the way, when there is necessarily a varied roofline, a mixture of the old state and the new. It's a question of priorities, I think. Should we target densification only if it's pretty at every step along the way, or should we accept that the change required is inherently piecemeal, and that incremental change should be welcomed so long as it's moving in that right direction? If we're able to solve that problem, then we can grow into a fundamentally more walkable, more cyclable city than our present mainly outward growth and mainly greenfield approach to satisfying our housing need. Secondly, I would contend that we are still giving appearance too much weight over energy efficiency. We still see applications asked to cut back on measures such as solar or other visible measures that, for energy efficiency for visual reasons. In fact, there are still parts of the city that have directives removing solar PD or which are mandating single glazing. I wouldn't suggest a blanket permission. Even I would admit we probably shouldn't solar-clad the Radcliffe camera, entertaining a prospect as it might be to think of. But I would suggest, as a rule of thumb, that where it is normal to see an old property with a modern SUV parked out the front, it also ought to be normal to see panels atop that property, situated so as to maximize energy efficiency rather than contorted for reasons of appearance. I think these are 2 really fundamental issues. I really, really hope that we can strain sinews to make more progress on those matters. Besides that, though, I look forward to seeing this plan go out to Reg 19. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm very pleased that Councillor Hollingsworth and the Labour administration are prioritising affordable housing in the new local plan. It's about time. The figures for social housing provision in Oxford are a disgrace. The council's own figures supplied to MHCLG and analysed by the Office for National Statistics show that in 2010, 16 years ago, there were 7,574 council dwellings and 5,153 housing association dwellings. By 2024, which is when the last full year of figures were available, council dwellings had risen just by 134. That's a lot less than 10 a year. Housing association dwellings have actually fallen by 656. This is pretty poor when South Cambridgeshire, a Liberal Democrat-run council, built 113 new council houses in less than a year. I do hope the new local plan will improve this.
Councillor Brown. Oh.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't quite know how to follow that, but I might try, because one of the things I'm very proud of is this council's record on housing, and I think our local plan has been very supportive of that. I mean, as we have been discussing earlier in the amendment debate, part of our issue is that there are very few large sites in the city left. In fact, there aren't any large sites left in the city. I mean, my recollection, because I sat on the council at this time, is that the last really big development that we had in this city was Northfield Brook. And that was, you know, the last really big development of social housing. But since then, we have done a lot through our wholly owned housing company and also through using money in the HRA to expand council housing in our city and indeed also shared ownership. And that has been partly as a result of decisions that we've taken as a council in terms of how we spend our money and how we operate ourselves, but also because of strong policies that we've had in our local plan. And that is really important. That wasn't what I was going to say, but I just felt I had to answer some of the points that have been made by Councillor Fowler, because it's just a nonsense to sort of compare us to South Cambridgeshire, which is a rural district that surrounds, it's basically all the bits that we're talking about in terms of expanding into in Greater Oxford. So it's a very, very different scenario to the city itself, which is so it's not a fair comparison at all. What I did want to say is a huge, huge thank you again to council officers, planning officers, who have really pulled out all the stops to get this done incredibly quickly, but incredibly well. And I think it really is a strengthened document compared to the previous version, which I also thought was good, but I think this one's perhaps even better. I'm particularly proud of the community employment plan policies in here, which I think are really, really important. And I was incredibly disappointed at the last time we put forward a local plan that we didn't manage to get that policy through, although I would commend council officers for having managed to nonetheless negotiate a number of community employment plans, and I think that again is a huge credit to our officers. But it is a really important part of the work that we do as a city council to make our economy locally truly inclusive, and so I am really welcoming its presence in this new local plan, and all power to your elbow when it comes to the planning inspector, and I really hope that we manage to get it through this time. So thank you very much. It's a really good document, and I commend it to council.
Thank you. And I believe, Councillor Hall, you've really got to put your hand up higher so I can say it properly. But OK, you next.
Just too short. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you. I'll start by saying our group will, overall, our group will be voting to approve the proposal to submit the draft local plan for public consultation tonight. We are grateful to see our amendments pass, and thanks to all the comments and support for those. We think this really strengthens the local plan as a whole. However, there are a few core aspects that we believe do undermine its potential to truly tackle the housing, inequality and climate and nature crises that we face in Oxford and beyond. Firstly, we question whether we've been bold enough in prioritising genuinely affordable housing over developer profit margins. Government guidance sets out that local plans should assume a 15 to 20% gross profit margin, though ours, in a city where average house prices are almost double that of the national average, is set at 18%. We believe that the viability assessment underpinning this plan shouldn't expect developers to need to make this level of profit in order to build here. If it didn't, then perhaps we could really set ambitious targets for the provision of affordable homes. Indeed, we're quite disappointed that this plan sets out that of developments of 10 or more homes, only a minimum of 40% will be affordable rather than the current 50% minimum. Further, the type of housing that is most needed in this city is social housing, and we believe that the minimum proportion should have been set higher. There are currently over 3,800 households on the housing register. Bringing down that wait list should be prioritised over those hoping to get just on the housing ladder. Relatedly, we see a core problem being that the number of jobs being created in Oxford is fast outpacing our ability to secure homes for those who wish to work and live here. We have made arguments before about the importance of measuring jobs to bed ratios and seeking of ways to reduce that gap. We would like to have seen that considered. However, what we really do welcome is the new inclusion of requiring housing contributions for developments that will generate significant employment. We think this is a really positive step towards readdressing that imbalance. Second, though we are deeply disappointed that the plan makes no effort to set biodiversity net gain targets significantly above the new national minimum. Natural England highlighted that the UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. For Oxford to play a part in addressing this deficit, we should be aiming higher, for 20% net gain, as many other councils have done. These councils demonstrated the need for higher targets based on evidence that highlighted the presence of rich and diverse ecosystems, that nature declines in the area are significant, that the area is expected to experience significant development. All these things are also true to Oxford. So the question is, why didn't we build this evidence base, and why didn't we make the argument that Oxford should have set higher targets? We feel that these changes could have opened up a range of opportunities for making our city greener and fairer, and we hope that these contributions are considered in future iterations of planning policy to come. Overall, however, though we appreciate the importance of having this local plan that can help us move beyond tired, outdated policies, and we welcome many, many of the improvements. So we'll therefore be voting in support of the plan for moving it forward to public consultation. Thanks.
Thank you. OK, any more before I go back to Councillor Hollingsworth? No. Excellent. OK, Councillor Hollingsworth.
I think this is it, isn't it? You won't hear from me again, which I imagine most people will be relieved about. Thank you for all contributions to the debates, contributions from the officers, contributions from all councillors. It's been very interesting and I hope positive and engaging. Just to touch on a couple of things. Councillor Smoten and I are basically in exactly the same position, except I think that the policies which are proposed achieve exactly what he and I want around density. Policy HD2, I have to choose these words ever so carefully. We are pushing the outer edge of the envelope on this compared to national government guidance, and rightly so, because of the issues around density. And I will come on to some of the issues around our ability to meet our housing need through sites. And of course, it is exactly the kind of sites you are talking about, which are the potential way of meeting our number, which we need to take into account. But you are quite right, and you have heard me say this, as the Planning Committee have when we've had decisions on this, that the low density developments, which are very prone, if they're from the 1920s and 1930s, and indeed some later developments, it's just not acceptable for an urban development to be that low density, and we need to do more. And I think policy HD2 does. So while I'm finishing, I would urge you to read it and then vote in favour of the local plan. On the notion of affordable housing, I was trying to work out exactly what data you were looking at, and I think you were looking at the number of council houses. Well, of course, that goes up if new ones are built and acquired by the council, and it goes down if they're acquired by the tenant through right to buy. Frankly, we're doing very well to stay still on our affordable housing within the HRA. But the bigger issue is the one that Councillor Brown made, which is that we have a policy which says currently 50%, regrettably, for good reason, which I shall come on to, it will fall to 40% of the site should be affordable housing, but it only applies if the site has 10 or more units. We used to have a policy which applied to sites which were 4 or more, and that was taken away from us by the then government in 2013. Oh, blimey, I'm on a time limit. Yeah. 2014. So anywhere where you have small sites where you can't apply affordable housing, it is very, very difficult. If you've got one walloping big site, as South Cambridgeshire would have had, more than one, then it is much easier to hit numbers. If you're on small sites, it's difficult. I would say, just as a final comment then, last one, because the profitability of developers was in your comment. The average guideline is 20%, and that is a developer who will take on all the risk. The landowner is going to take none of the risk and is going to make thousands of percent. I think if you're looking at developers, you're looking at the wrong people. It is not developers who are the problem with this. It is landowners who are the problem. And that has been growing and growing and growing in this country for decades and decades. And it does raise a really serious issue. But I would not be looking at developers making 20% when they're taking on all the risk. I would look at landowners making thousands of percent when they're taking exactly none of the risk. And with that, I move the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. Okay. In that case, can I see all of those in favour of the recommendations around this amended local plan? All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Okay, all of those against? And any abstentions? Okay, that's very clearly passed. Thank you. Okay. Thank God. Okay. I think you can go now. Yeah.
Please feel free to go home. Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Okay, while there's a little bit of distraction in the middle, I'd like us to crack on. Item 12, Designation of a Section 151 officer. I call on Councillor Brown to introduce the report.
I will make my various reports as quick as possible. Obviously, Council be aware that our highly regarded Section 151 officer, Nigel Kennedy, is sadly taking retirement at the end of this council year. This report sets out that we have appointed Alistair Rush as the interim Group Chief Finance Officer, and Council needs to formally appoint him as our Section 151 officer. I hope you will all support, and I call upon Councillor Chris Smoten to second the report.
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anybody want to comment or ask a question? No, good. I'd like to put the
Yeah.
Oh,
for
sorry.
the record, can we also just thank Nigel Kennedy for his work as well? Thank you.
Oh, well,
Excellent
here,
idea.
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. We'll make sure that is noted. So can I see all those in favour of the recommendations? Thank you. All of those against? Any abstentions? No, good. Item 13, appointment of committee to the for the remainder of the council year. Call on Councillor Brown to introduce the report.
The report sets out the latest allocations to committee post the changes in membership of different groups. I think really it falls upon the council to just make a resolution that it's happy to accept the lack of proportionality and then to agree the recommendations of the different committees that are set out in the report. But Emma's shaking her head at me, so I think I'm going wrong.
I'm sorry, Councillor Brown. What I believe is not contained in the report, but I believe is acceptable to Council, subject to your voting on it, is that Councillor Jupp will take a... Sorry, is that Councillor Jupp will take a seat on audit and governance. So if you could, if that was what I believe the recommendation was going to be amended as.
Apologies, and I certainly have no objection to that. It was it seems to have been an oversight in the report. So so yes, moving as I move the report, I'm also moving the addition that Councillor Jupp will stay on audit and governance, as I understand it, which is part of the not proportional allocation.
And we need a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Jarvis. So this is very simple if nobody votes against it, okay? So can I see all those in favour of the recommendation? Okay, thank you. And anyone against? Any abstentions? No. Hooray, good, done. Thank you. Then we can move on to item 14, the reworked working overseas policy and procedure. I call on Councillor Chapman to introduce
the key word is
report.
reworked, because many of you raised perfectly sensible objections to the previous draft. So we went away and looked at it. It is a much more pragmatic and enlightened policy than we had before. I understand there's been discussions between the party leaders about this, and there is a consensus about it. So I'm asking for your support. I think it hits the right spot now. We do need to have a policy about this. We can't have a vacuum here. So I really do urge for your support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Calling on, I think, Councillor Brown to second it.
Formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, anybody want to comment or ask a question? Excellent. Can I put the recommendations to the vote then, please? All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? No, unanimous again. Thank you very much indeed. Then we're on to item 15, Constitution updates. Can I call on Councillor Brown to introduce the report?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I describe the changes here as largely about the process of making our constitution clearer and more consistent. It updates the items that should be on the forward plan, making it easier for councillors and officers to be aware of upcoming decisions and the processes for making them. And it also clarifies who can put items on committee agendas. In moving the report, I should also say that there is some stray text that has appeared in the second item on the table under reasons. Before final publication, this will be corrected. This does not change the substance of the report, and so in moving the report and drawing your attention to it, I think it can be agreed under the normal minor amendments before publication clause, but I wanted to reassure councillors that it had been spotted and that it will be changed. So I move the report.
Thank you very much. And do you have a seconder? Councillor Smoten, I think.
Much as it would please me to give a 20-minute speech about procurement, I think I'll just formally second, Lord Mayor.
Thank Thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions from members? No. Good. Then I'll put the recommendations to the vote, please. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. Okay, that is carried. On to item 16, Council and Committee Meetings Programme from May 26 to 28. Call on Councillor Brown to introduce
The report sets out the meetings programme for next year. I'd like to thank officers for their work in setting this out, and I hope we can agree it.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder, Councillor Jarvis? Yeah, great. Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Ashad.
Comments is Ramadan starting next month, so I'm looking forward to it. Was it this month? Sorry, February. Still January.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, with that in mind, can I put this recommendation to the vote? All those for? Sorry. Just vote. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. Okay, that is unanimously carried. So we're on to item 17, which is the appointment of the Independent Remuneration Panel. Councillor Brown to introduce the report.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a legal obligation. We are required to do this. It's very important that councillors' I never say this word, remuneration, is decided not by councillors but reviewed, and recommendations are made independently. The panel will report their recommendation to this council later this year. So I move the report, and I believe Councillor Henwood is going to second it.
Thank you. Formally seconding? Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Great. I'm going to put these recommendations to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Can I see all those against? Any abstentions? No. Another unanimous decision. Good. Then we're on to item 18, the urgent key decisions made since July 2025. Call on Councillor Brown to introduce this report.
Yeah, this report is just to note, but I'd like to thank officers who worked really hard to make sure that these urgent key decisions are indeed urgent and key. And I think that we have got to a point where that is what is happening. And I think that these decisions stand up to examination under those principles. So happy to answer any questions if people have them, but otherwise please do note the report.
Thanks. Any questions? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, it's not really a question rather than, I guess, an assumption that I'd like to state that last year at scrutiny, because we had recognised that was a growing trend towards these urgent key decisions, it was requested that a report was produced annually for scrutiny to have a summary of all of the decisions so they could be looked at in aggregate to see that trend over time. And so I would hope that this is something that is presented to the new chair of scrutiny this year, given that this trend seems to be increasing and or continuing. And so just would like to request whether that will be the case. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take Councillor Fairweather first and then go back to Councillor Brown. Thanks.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have three questions on the ice rink chillers. Was it known in 2023 that the chillers were not able to be repaired if they failed? Secondly, has an independent report on the chillers been carried out, or is it just Serco's opinion? And finally, in the last paragraph before financial implications, two alternatives were considered. The first being to continue running blah, blah, blah. No mention of what the alternative was.
Back to you, Councillor Brown, and bearing in mind written answers are acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, it took me a while to actually understand what Councillor Farworth was talking about because I couldn't hear what you were saying. But so I understand you're now asking questions about the chillers. To be honest, if you've got detailed questions on this, I think bearing in mind the hour and bearing in mind the fact that I'm not expert on this particular decision, I think it would be best if we gave you a written answer. But this was an urgent decision. We needed to make sure that the ice rink was functioning, this is. I'm happy that this was both a key decision and an urgent decision, which is what I was saying earlier. And sorry, in terms of the scrutiny report, I think that's something that we will work on. But I don't think we ever made the promise to scrutiny that we wouldn't be making urgent and key decisions. My concern, and I've shared the concern of scrutiny committee, was that some of the decisions that were coming to us as urgent and key decisions were coming because they hadn't been planned as well as they should have been. And I think that is what we are not seeing now. I think that these are genuinely coming forward as urgent and key.
Okay, Councillor Morris. Powell, sorry.
That's okay. Just very briefly, as Chair of Scrutiny, to confirm that the last few decisions have genuinely felt like they have been urgent and key, and I do see a change from the trend we'd noticed previously. So if it's reassurance, I would agree with that.
Thank you very much for that addition. Okay, on that note, are you all just happy to note the report?
Aye.
Right, thank you. We're then moving on to item 19, question on cabinet minutes, where we've got a maximum of 15 minutes for 3 different meetings worth of minutes. So anyone want to comment or ask questions on the meetings from the special meeting on the 4th of December? It was about about the devolution decision. No. Good. Any comments or questions on the minutes from the 10th of December? No comments or questions on the minutes from the 21st of January? No. Excellent. Thank you very much. Then we will move on to item number 20, which is questions on notice. There's a reasonable number, but not as many as there have been. So we've got 26 questions to get through. This is the last item. So this is questions for Councillor Brown. I have not got my next page. Sorry. Councillor Smouten, do you have a supplementary?
2 passes, Lord Mayor. That was no to SB1, no to SB2, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, SB3, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. What's the page I was missing? Was that a no? Okay, then we're moving on to questions for Councillor Railton. AR1, Councillor Yateman, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Thank you. AR2, Councillor Miles, do you?
Yes, this was respect to the shortlist for the Learner Cycle Park and the criteria being used to identify the shortlist. Has a decision been taken about which one to proceed with by officers? Thank you.
Yes, so we are going to start by scoping out Florence Park and seeing if we can make the sort of planning considerations and stuff work there. And yeah, I'm happy to, for you to be involved in the process, obviously, along with anybody else who is interested.
Thank you. AR3, Councillor Powell, do you have a follow-up?
No follow-ups for any of my questions here, but thank you very much for the answers.
Thank you. AR6, Councillor Robinson, do you have a follow-up? Moving on to questions to Councillor Chapman. NC1, Councillor Yateman, do you have a follow-up?
No, it's been covered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. NC2, Councillor Miles, do you have a follow-up? NC3, Councillor Powell, do you have a follow-up?
Not at this time. I'll pick it up over email, probably given the hour.
Appreciated. Thank you. Questions for Councillor Hollingsworth. AH1, Councillor Stairs, do you have a?
Yes, I do. Littlemore Parish Council has received a small proportion of SIL, but certainly nowhere near sufficient to tackle the decline in inadequacies that have been allowed to happen under decades of Labour. Blackbird Leys also has a parish council, but that has not prevented the City Council in investing in rejuvenation after rejuvenation there.
Sorry, is this a question?
Yeah,
it has to be a question. Can get to it, please.
A reminder that under decades of Labour and this administration, Littlemore has declined beyond recognition. No doctors, no dentists.
No, sorry, we need to get to a question. It's not a speech, it's a quick... Can you skip to it, please?
Yeah, I will. So this administration collusion with the county council in shutting off routes to easy access of necessary services.
Really? To the question?
It is coming. So plundering Littlemore's assets and donating its wealth across the city like a reverse Robin Hood, taking from a ward which has nothing and giving towards that already has much, much more. My question is, How much longer? How much longer?
Sorry, this needs to be a question.
Exactly.
Is this it? Okay, how much longer?
How much longer will it be before it's Littlemore's turn to have amenities?
The question that I was originally asked was relation to what SIL money was raised and where it went. So the question, the follow-on question is actually a rather more strategic one, and I would say there's been quite a significant amount of attempts at investment. Obviously, for doctor surgeries, for example, it requires the NHS to actually want to provide the doctors, and I think we have been down this particular route in a number of parts of the city where the NHS have not been willing to actually provide doctors. The Wolvercote councillors can very much avow for this, as would the Rose Hill councillors to some extent. What I would draw attention to is, compared to, I think, our other parish councils, is that Littlemore Parish Council has and will continue to earn a very, very substantial sum of money. I appreciate that there are further plans in the pipeline, but my understanding is that of the £815,968 so far, it's spent roughly 40,000, thus leaving quite a lot, which I'm sure, with your advice, it will be willing to invest.
Thank you. Question AH2. Councillor Henwood, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the response and acknowledging the reduction in city centre car park usage. To be fair, this is not short-term. The congestion charge will be replaced with bus filters.
Is this a question?
Yes, there is, Chair, and I'm getting to it. Thank you so much for reminding me. Labour does not object to. Will the portfolio holder release the data mentioned in his response?
As I said, it's short-term data. I'm not hiding the data. I'm just trying to draw attention to the fact that any transport policy has short-term impacts which change very rapidly. You won't get anything meaningful from it. Well, it depends what you want to do with it, I suppose. You know, you want to pick a particular fact, distort it to your use, then that option is available. But the data will be available. What I would strongly suggest to you, and indeed anyone else, including advocates for the congestion charge, is wait until the data has had time to settle and then draw a sensible and thoughtful conclusion from it.
Thank you. Just a reminder, everyone, these are follow-up questions and not an opportunity to make a speech. So, AH3, Councillor Stairs, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't.
Thank you. AH4, Councillor Henwood, do you?
No supplementary.
Thank you. AH5, Councillor Muddiman.
Yes, thank you. I've got questions on AH5 and AH6. With your permission, I'll just go straight through.
Yes.
On AH5, the new contract with Jackson's is to a value of 5.4 million, substantially less than the original contract with Balfour Beatty. Can you explain the huge reduction in the cost? And also, will the council still need the 3.7 million, I can't say this word, virement, that word. Environment, thank you. Environment, will that still be required? Thank you.
The main reason for the difference between the two contracts is that Balfour Beatty was a design and construction, and the contract with Jackson's is not the design element. So the design element is the major difference. The cost of materials, specifically steel, which is quite important. Certainly, my aspiration had been for wood, but engineers and architects said not possible. And the biggest objection was from the Environment Agency, who said if you put wood over the River Thames, we will never allow you to treat it, and therefore you can't have it. So there we go. Environment Agency like steel better than wood. Who could tell? So the precise those are details. But the main reason is that the design element is not included in the Jackson's contract, and of course anything like this has got a substantial design cost. So that's the main difference. So it's not that it's suddenly vastly cheaper. It's two somewhat different contracts.
No, there was a second part to that question about the vehement. I can't still.
Sorry, I lost track slightly. Just say very briefly what you wanted me to say about environment.
Is it still going to be required? There was going to be 3.7 million that.
The environment was there to have a temporary fix while resources are being sought from elsewhere. That is not yet absolutely finalised, but I am hopeful that it will be. And therefore, the environment from any council resources should not be required, certainly not to that extent, but we await paperwork and such like, or whatever the electronic version of paperwork is with various national institutions and local ones.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just
Question
moving.
AH7.
This is AH6. Given that we cannot discuss the Oxpens Bridge motion this evening and that the standstill period will now expire this week on the signing of the contract, will you consider delaying the signing of the contract until this motion is heard?
As I think I've made clear repeatedly, this council has been trying to pursue the construction of this bridge for 20 years. One of the reasons that the costs you refer to have gone up is the legal challenges led by the person who came to address the council. That has increased the cost. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I have absolutely no intention whatsoever to unnecessarily increase the cost still further without purpose.
Thank you. Okay, AH7, Councillor.
No, thank you.
AH8, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Thank you for your detailed reply. And yes, the traffic marshal is helping, but really very serious breaches continue. And Thames Valley Police have told us repeatedly that
Is
it's
this
not,
a question?
Yeah, not their responsibility to enforce the traffic plan. My question is, how can you think that the planning enforcement team's graduated approach is in line with its own corporate enforcement policy, which says our core duty is to protect the public and safeguard children and vulnerable adults from harm?
I do take the points, and I completely understand. I mean, both you and your fellow local councillor have been extremely clear about how unsatisfactory this situation is and what is happening. The challenge that our planning enforcement team have is that they don't have the powers to actually be able to apply on, say, speeding traffic. They have to have the police's engagement on that. The only way it could be changed is changed to legislation at a national level, which is, I think, unlikely to happen. All I can say is I completely appreciate the frustration that local residents, the local councillors have about this, the parish council. All efforts, both forcibly waving banners at the police or saying, yes, we would love to come and operate a speed camera, whatever technical device it is, if you would actually do your bit, which is the legal bit, and do some enforcement. I think the planning enforcement officers who have found the police's attitude on this pretty frustrating would be deeply grateful, but I do appreciate the frustration, really do.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. I'm very sorry to do this, but I think it is necessary, which is that the Constitution on Questions on Notice, 11.11, is very clear that questions can be up to 3 minutes, and there have been a number of questions that have been interrupted in the conversation this evening. And I know we're all tired and raring to go home, but I think in respect of the questioners, we should be following the Constitution setting out how long people are permitted to ask questions for.
I think it may come down to the definition of asking a question versus making a speech. Right, thank you. So we're finally getting to questions for Councillor Smith, and I think the questioner, Councillor Jafari Marbini, has left the meeting already, which means we are at the end of questions. So thank you all very much for staying so long. I think the local plan is one of the most powerful bits of legislation that we pass, or things that we pass, so it was really needed to be debated fully and properly. Thank you for all your engagement. Have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.